The story begins. On the other side of the untouched fog, there was a place called Hesperis. It was a place where lush gardens grew with the fruits of the gods. It was a land of monsters, guarded by fairies and dragons, and where people did not dare to go. It was a beautiful place where legends lived, one of whom was right now drinking a cool drink through a straw. It was the main character of this story, who was walking around the area absolutely serenely. The bright warm sun blinded her eyes, so the girl wore sunglasses. Hesperis was the place where the well-known evil spirits could calmly stroll along the coast while sipping Americano with ice. The main character looked around with confusion, wondering where all his friends had gone. On the sandy shore there was only a sign warning to beware of the jellyfish, since its identity had been revealed. The girl was angered by this inscription because it was talking about her, so she broke the sign without a doubt. After that, she thought that she had not been here for so long that no one was probably waiting for her, so she just had to accept it and calmly go home. This evil spirit was called Medusa, and suddenly she heard some strange noise which immediately attracted her attention. Instead of hair, the girl had snakes, and when looking into her eyes, everyone turned to stone. The creature from the legends was indignant, believing that now was not the time for performances. Among other things, Medusa loved coffee, so when she heard the familiar aroma, she immediately realized that it was the smell of the best coffee beans from the mountain on the island of Seriphos. The girl immediately went to look for the source of this smell, believing that it was somewhere on the beach. Medusa was sure that she was right, but soon she was stunned by surprise when she saw something unusual. The raging waves of warm seawater washed ashore an inconspicuous wooden box, past which the girl could not pass. She quickly and silently approached the unusual find, being sure that it was exactly what she needed. The girl held her breath and took the box in her hands, trembling as she waited for the moment to open the drawer. Medusa was happy because she was absolutely sure that this was a box with the best coffee beans from the mountain on the island of Seriphos. The next moment, the girl's confidence immediately disappeared because she heard an unusual sound coming from the box. This surprised her very much. Quickly recovering from this unexpected incident, the jellyfish began to think about what could already be inside the box. She didn't spend much time guessing, but instead creaked open the drawers and looked inside, expecting to get answers to her questions. Medusa was very surprised when she saw a small child with big blue eyes and white hair inside the box. The girl did not understand how he could have ended up here and assumed that this child had crossed the sea in this box, despite the fact that he could not even speak yet. The jellyfish was very angry with the people because she thought that they threw the child into the sea because he did not speak. The girl threatened that she would not leave it like that. She quickly calmed down when she heard the child's voice, which seemed to be trying to say something, but all that came out was incoherent sounds. Medusa was delighted by this and invited the ignorant child to go to her home. From this moment, our story began. The girl walked along the sandy shore, accompanied by a creature that would soon change her destiny. Some time passed. The unusual locals, who were also mythical creatures, looked off to the side with incomprehension. They did not understand what was happening to Medusa, who could hardly move. Seeing the child in her arms, everyone assumed that this was another human victim. Suddenly, the girl sharply raised her head up and took a deep breath. Everyone present immediately became frightened and turned away from her so as not to turn into stone. Meanwhile, Medusa was remembering and did not understand how all this happened, because she was calmly walking along the beach, but suddenly she was almost washed away by a wave. After she barely managed to get to the shore, she was immediately attacked by a bunch of crabs for some unknown reason. Then, walking along a familiar road, a stone appeared out of nowhere and Medusa tripped and almost died from a strong fall. In addition to this, all the coffee coupons that the girl had so diligently collected had disappeared from her wallet. Medusa did not understand the reason for everything that was happening to her, so she assumed that the gods were testing her. Still, she agreed to happily overcome such difficult realities. After some time, the girls almost managed to get to the right place. She already saw her house in the distance, despite the fact that today was one of the unluckiest days for her. Then the jellyfish decided that all she could do was run, so as not to bring any more misfortune upon herself. So she got ready and asked the child to hold on tighter. When Medusa wanted to run forward, the difficulties did not leave her. Firstly, a few days ago, a large cart passed here. Because of this, stones appeared on the road that were not there before. Usually the jellyfish did not have to deal with stones, but not today. Also at that moment, a small breeze brought a leaf that covered the girl's eyes, preventing her from seeing what was happening ahead. By a coincidence, the fruit cart was heading straight for Medusa right now. All this coincided so successfully that the girl definitely could not do anything to avoid trouble. The next moment, having collided with the cart, Medusa was thrown high into the air from the impact, after which she simply flew forward, simultaneously emitting a loud scream. At this time, another local resident and part-time evil spirit was very puzzled by something. The girl looked closely into the magic ball because she saw that something was emerging in it. She had a premonition that a great misfortune was approaching. The next moment, Medusa fell with a crash right next to the girl, which scared her greatly. It seemed that this was exactly the misfortune that was spoken of in the prophecy. Despite what happened, the girl was glad that she got home, albeit with the wind in her hair. After that, she turned to her sister and informed her that she had returned. The seer tried to find out everything, but the girl said that today was her bad day, so she did not want to tell anything. Despite this, she asked with fear in her voice where this child came from. Medusa happily told that she found this baby today and will now take care of him. She also said that people threw this baby right into the sea. Suddenly, the main character's sister interrupted her and loudly ordered her to immediately get rid of this child. Medusa was very surprised by this and did not understand the reason for the girl's anxiety. For some time, the seer silently looked at the child in Medusa's arms. Her face expressed fear and great anxiety. She couldn't believe her eyes because it was the fateful child who was surrounded by a terrible aura. Suddenly, the girl suggested that if things continued like this child would eventually kill Medusa. The girl was very surprised by this statement. After that, she silently looked at the small child she was holding in her arms, as if trying to find confirmation of her sister's words. Still, the jellyfish looked at the girl with suspicion, assuming that she had already managed to drink alcohol. The seer immediately began to deny it. Several burning candles illuminated the dark space around with their small flames. At this time, the seer was silently and diligently drawing something on the wooden floor. Medusa was watching all this from the side. She was very nervous but did not interfere in the process. Soon the girl announced that everything was ready. The small, ignorant child looked around with incomprehension. He sat in the center of a circle drawn on the floor. There were also burning candles placed around the circle and sheets of paper with mysterious symbols lying everywhere. The seer stated that they were now relatively safe and suggested starting a family meeting. Medusa did not understand what all this was about. The girl turned loudly to her sister and said with all seriousness that these were not jokes. Then the second of the Gorgon sisters, named Urieli, stated that Medusa's life was indeed under serious threat. The girl continued in an ominous voice, saying that she felt a powerful heroic aura emanating from this little child. Urieli wanted to say something else about the baby's strength, but suddenly stopped because she saw how he was chewing something in his mouth. The girl was shocked when she realized that the child had managed to break through the seals and crawl here. At the same time, Medusa thought that any child could have blown out the candles and torn the tape off the floor. The main character's sister continued to be indignant and say that the girl should have listened to her words because she clearly saw what her connection with this child could lead to. Medusa looked surprised because she still didn't understand why her sister was saying such things about a small, defenseless child. Urieli continued to say that there could be no mistake here, and this child was born to kill the girl. She also warned that if the jellyfish left him alive, the prediction would come true. After these words, the girl thought, because she knew well that among the three Gorgon sisters, only two of them were immortal. The main character herself, being the youngest of them, was mortal. It was safe to say that Medusa was a creature destined to die. She was an evil spirit with snakes instead of hair, and was destined to die at the hands of a hero. Unexpectedly, Medusa, after thinking for a bit, began to deny her sister's words, which surprised her very much. The girl continued to say that this child had no strength at all, so she even felt sorry for him. Urieli tried to reason with her sister, but she did not listen. Medusa also said that she found this child abandoned by people just like him. The girl was worried that when the child grew up and found out about everything, he would become sad. She herself did not particularly like people, but she did not understand how it was possible to hate this baby. Still, the main character thought that even if this child was destined to kill her, there was no point in believing in a prediction that had not even happened yet. Urieli was extremely unhappy that her sister was trying to let things slide, but Medusa reminds me that every time the girl tried to choose a prophecy, it still came true. Then the main character suggested that it was possible not to believe or avoid him, but to try to befriend the child and bypass the prophecies. Suddenly, Urieli turned to her sister and drew her attention to the fact that the child she had so protected had set her hair on fire. The girl immediately began to put out the flames while Urieli stood frightened to the side. I don't understand how the child managed to move the candle and set the girl's hair on fire. After that, she told her sister that this child could become a burden to her, even if not on purpose. Medusa annoyedly suggested that she was simply unlucky. After this, the main character laughed and turned to the child and asked her for forgiveness, assuming that he was scared. She also named him Percy. Urieli was very surprised that her sister had already given this child a name. Then the dissatisfied girl asked if Medusa hadn't listened to her at all. The main character reminded that she never cared about her sister's opinion. She then said that she was going to raise this child anyway, and also reminded that before Urieli calmly tolerated such things. The girl replied that her sister had previously brought normal children, but now it was a completely different case. Nevertheless, Medusa stated that she had already decided everything. Urieli was very angry but could do nothing with her sister, who also began to tease her and said that she was not afraid of her at all. Still, the girl sighed heavily as if resigning herself to this situation. The main character was very pleased with her victory in this argument. Next, Urieli said that if her sister had listened to her, there wouldn't have been rumors circulating around the area that they were swindlers. After that, she suggested that they had no choice but to move on to Plan B. Medusa was surprised because she didn't understand what it meant. The girl explained that she meant the words of her sister that she had spoken earlier. It was a way to pardon this child. She then suggested trying to improve relations with him in order to be allies and not enemies. To put it simply, Urieli suggested creating a family out of evil spirits and a hero. After that, the girl exhaled heavily because she couldn't believe that she had said that. Medusa thought that her sister was wrong to trust predictions that never came true, because it was hard to believe that such a cute baby could harm anyone. After this, the girl suggested that Urieli take a closer look at the child in order to make sure that he was harmless. It seemed that she was not particularly happy with this offer. As expected from a small child, he looked absolutely calm and peaceful. There was no hint of danger. Urieli was struck by Percy's cute appearance, which made her freeze in place for a moment as if she had been blinded by a bright light. The girl never expected such an effect with which a small child was influencing her right now. Still, Urieli began to admit first of all to herself that this baby really was cute and did not look dangerous. Suddenly, the enchanted girl began to slowly stretch out her hand towards Percy in order to touch such an unusual phenomenon. The next moment, lightning struck between Urieli and Medusa, who was holding the child. It frightened the girl very much and did not give her exactly what she had planned. It turned out that lightning managed to penetrate the room through a hole in the roof that remained after the fall of Medusa. The girl herself explained what happened by the fact that the weather had long been approaching rain. At the same time, the shocked Urieli had her own explanation, which of course did not coincide with the words of her sister. She then stated that she no longer wanted to be near this child because she was almost struck by lightning. She believed that it was heavenly punishment. Medusa did not agree with this and believed that her sister was simply in a bad mood, which is why she saw threats in the form of fate or heavenly punishment everywhere. After this, the main character asked Urieli to take the child in her arms. As soon as Percy was in her arms, the girl was immediately dumbfounded with fear and could not even move. Medusa asked her sister to look after the child while she would prove to her that she was wrong. Urieli nervously watched as the girl got ready to go somewhere, saying along the way that the prediction about her death had nothing to do with reality. The main character approached the door, assuming that according to the prophecy, even if she managed to remain unharmed at home, she would immediately die when she went outside. After this, the girl fearlessly began to open the door because she was completely confident in her bed and wanted to prove it to her sister. As soon as the door opened in front of Medusa, a whole pile of stones immediately fell, which could easily have harmed her if the girl had stopped at the last moment to say something else to her sister. The main character was very surprised when she realized what had happened. At that moment, out of nowhere, someone's voice was heard, worried, and asking if anyone had been hurt. Some evil spirit on a flying horse asked for forgiveness and explained that he was a repairman of the Golden Garden and accidentally dropped something on this house because it suddenly started to rain. Medusa didn't respond to this but silently tried to come to her senses. It seemed that her soul had left her body. However, the girl admitted that she was destined for a fate that she could not avoid. Urieli turned to her sister and said that today she had punched a hole in the roof, and as soon as she tried to leave the house, this happened, so she suggested just ordering delivery and eating. Still agitated, the main character thought it was a good decision. She also didn't forget about Percy, so she asked if her sister had anything she could feed him. It was an ordinary, quiet, sunny day that did not at all foresee any worries or concerns. However, this could not be said about the house of the main character and her sister because a disaster happened there. The thing was that for some reason Percy was crying loudly and rocking on the floor, and the girls couldn't do anything about it. Medusa again tried to calm the child by drawing his attention to her hair, instead of which there were snakes. Nevertheless, Percy continued to show his character and grabbed the snake and pulled it towards himself, which of course did not please Medusa at all. Urieli couldn't stand it and decided that things wouldn't go this way and asked her sister to throw this child out of the house. The main character was of course against this. The problem started half an hour ago when Medusa tried to feed the baby. Urieli already thought that it was not a very good idea. The main character didn't listen to her, but was also happy that there was still some baby food left at home. Handing Percy a spoon with food, the girl asked him to open his mouth and eat. The child obediently fulfilled this request, and a moment later the food was already in his mouth. Medusa was very happy that her ward ate everything so easily. At the same time, Urieli was surprised that her sister fed the child like an ordinary creature. The girl replied that this was how normal children should be fed, but at that moment Percy's expression changed for some reason. Unexpectedly, the child spat out the food offered to him from his mouth because he really didn't like it. Medusa and Urieli were so shocked by this that they stood there dumbfounded for a while without saying a word. Finally, the shocked Urieli asked the gods for help, because she already understood how difficult it would be for them with such a picky child. At the same time, Medusa was silent. It seemed that she was very pleased with what had happened. However, the main character realized that the little child simply did not like the food she offered him. The unexpectedly joyful girl thought that there was nothing terrible about this, because she had stocked up on all kinds of baby food here. Then she hoped that something would definitely be to the child's taste. Percy himself hardly believed in this. Some time passed. Medusa and Urieli tried everything they could, but the child was still feeling bad because he didn't like anything. The main character did not understand the reason for this and seemed about to give up. Urieli began to reproach her sister for not being able to feed the child, although she often looked after the children. To this girl answered that she did not know the reason, because she had never seen such a capricious child in her life. Then Urieli asked what to feed him, because children screamed when they were hungry. At this moment, Percy's expression began to change, and the first tears appeared in his eyes. The next moment, the child began to scream and cry loudly. What our heroines feared most happened. Then Urieli suggested leaving the child hungry, which Medusa didn't like at all. She got angry at her sister and asked her how she could bring herself to say such a thing. After this, the main character assumed that Percy might like something from ordinary food, so she began to look for all the products that were at home. After some time, the girl had already thought about what she could prepare for the child while he was distracted by the lollipop. Urieli was surprised at how much food her sister had, although she had recently told her that she had nothing. After that, the girl saw that Percy liked the candy and therefore asked if it was possible to put the baby to sleep along with it. Medusa replied that the baby needed proper food. Soon the main character brought a small box and solemnly announced that it was time to try out the first candidate for the role of lunch for Percy. It was organic rice grown under the beautiful sun of Attica. It was high-quality baby food prepared with lots of vegetables without any chemicals. The pleased Medusa believed that the child would definitely like this, because after trying this dish, any child would not be able to resist finishing it completely. Then the girl handed the spoon with rice to the child and asked him to open his mouth. Surprised, Percy even put the candy aside to try the offered dish. Suddenly, the child demonstratively threw the spoon with rice aside, thus showing that he was not going to even try this dish. Urieli immediately began to laugh at her sister who had failed. Medusa was very surprised that the child did not like the rice, but said that she still had the strength to cook something else. Soon the girl presented mini rice balls made especially for kids like Percy. The main character was sure that everyone liked this dish because of its cute shape. This time Percy even agreed to try this food because he opened his mouth in preparation to give the mini rice balls a chance. Then the little child began to chew the food thoroughly. Meanwhile, the 2-year-olds froze in anticipation of Percy's verdict. The next moment it became clear that the baby didn't like this dish either, because he spat it out. Immediately after this, Urieli began to laugh at her sister again while she regretted yet another failure. However, the main character was not going to tolerate ridicule and quickly calmed her sister down by intimidating her with her strength, which left the girl dumbfounded on the spot. After that, Medusa prepared another dish, not wanting to give up. Urieli was indignant that her sister dared to use her power on her. The girl assured that everything would soon return to normal. Meanwhile, Percy, looking displeased, again refused to eat, which no longer surprised anyone. Then the main character offered the child another dish, but he demonstratively kicked the plate away. For some time, Medusa continued her futile attempts to feed Percy, but none of the dishes offered were able to interest the child. Now we're back to the moment when Percy was crying loudly and rocking on the floor and the girls couldn't do anything about it. Medusa did not understand why the child did not like anything and assumed that he wanted to see how his adoptive mother would faint from helplessness. Urieli suggested turning the baby into a statue, which the girl did not like at all. Then Urieli said that she was tired of the capricious child and she could no longer tolerate his presence in their house. The main character asked her sister to finally become kinder. However, the girl continued to say that it was strange to raise a human child who was born to kill them. Along the way, Percy noticed an apple that was lying nearby. For some time, the girls continued to argue and threaten each other that their older sister would soon arrive, and then one of them would definitely not be able to say hello. Suddenly, the swearing stopped because Medusa and Urieli heard strange sounds that immediately attracted their attention. It turned out that the source of these sounds was Percy, who himself found something that could be eaten for lunch. The girls were shocked and couldn't believe their luck, because finally they found something that the child was willing to eat. Now Medusa realized that Percy liked the apples. Urieli didn't understand why the girl didn't offer them to the child from the very beginning. The girl was also interested in what her sister would do next. It was impossible to feed the child only apples, but the main character did not lose her enthusiasm. The girl began to say that now they knew what Percy liked, which meant they could broaden their horizons and cook similar dishes for him. To begin with, the girl suggested making apple porridge, since the baby could handle the apples, and in order to do everything faster, Medusa needed Urieli's help, which surprised her. Soon the girls went down to the basement to get some apples, because the main character clearly remembered that she had bought a lot of them the other day. What Medusa saw in the bag instantly made her shut up. For the sake of dear viewers, the author censored this miracle. The main character immediately began to close the bag before her sister saw anything, but it was too late. Urieli asked what it was, suggesting that the girl had decided to invent an elixir of eternal youth. It turned out that absolutely all the apples were already spoiled, which upset Medusa a little. However, the girl felt that she had no choice but to go and buy some fresh apples. Suddenly, Urieli asked how her sister was going to do it. Medusa did not understand what the girl meant. Then she pointed to the small child and asked where Medusa was going to put him while she went shopping. After this question, there was absolute silence in the room for a while, because one girl was thinking about the answer and the other was humbly waiting for it. However, Medusa thought that if she left Percy at home, her sister would take good care of him. Urieli did not like this idea at all. Percy started crying loudly again, because he was already hungry. It was not surprising because you can't really get full with just one apple. Urieli was very unhappy with this noise. Medusa told her sister that in order to feed the child, she needed to go to the market. The girl continued to say that it was dangerous to go out with the baby for now, so she advised him to stay with the aunt. "Let's cheer up Percy." The main character showed him one of her snakes again. The little boy immediately decided to show his displeasure and grabbed the girl's hair. Urieli was very scared of this and began to scream loudly, so Medusa had to take the child with her. After some time, the main character was already walking down the street, and along the way she noticed the intent glances of unusual local residents. The girl was very unhappy with this and, calling the evil spirits scarecrows, asked if they wanted to turn into a statue for the garden. Meanwhile, Percy looked around in surprise. Medusa said that it was called a market. She also said that they finally got out into the world for the first time in a long time, but then everyone stared at them. Suddenly, something caught the attention of the main character. She quickly turned to the side, feeling the approach of danger. The next moment, the girl quickly opened the umbrella that she had been holding in her hands all this time, in order to protect herself from the sudden flow of water. After this, someone's worried voice turned to Medusa and asked if everything was okay with her. The girl was still in slight shock and was trying to come to her senses. After that, the main character immediately checked if everything was okay with Percy. She was glad that she took her sister's umbrella with her, because even the road here was a continuous adventure. Medusa remembered everything that had happened to her in such a short time and assumed that she really was a real loser. Suddenly, someone turned to the girl again and asked if everything was okay with her. Medusa looked ahead with displeasure. In front of her stood Hesperides. She was a nymph guarding the garden of the Hesperides. The girl was worried whether the main character had gotten hurt. The dissatisfied main character immediately asked if she had just been splashed with water. Hesperida began to ask for forgiveness and explained that during cleaning, she had turned on the water but had not checked it. Medusa did not believe it and asked if the girl had done it on purpose. Suddenly, someone else's voice was heard, addressing Hesperida and asking her what had happened. Medusa immediately stopped swearing. She looked to the side in surprise and was very surprised to see another nymph, who was also guarding the garden of the Hesperides. The girl, seeing Medusa, began to ask with displeasure if she was bothering her sister again. Hesperides tried to explain that it was her fault, but her sister did not listen to her. The girl continued to say that the main character again had nothing to do, so she bothered people. These words clearly touched Medusa, which made her very angry at the second Hesperid. It seemed that an undeclared war had been going on between the girls for a long time. Medusa began to scream that it was the girl's fault that she almost suffered. Hesperida also loudly responded that her sister did not do it on purpose, so she should not be blamed. Hesperida tried to explain to her sister that she was indeed guilty, but the girl believed that all this could not be left like that. Suddenly, the second Hesperid fell silent, and the video showed a small child behind Medusa. She asked directly if the main character had stolen a human child again. The girl was very unhappy with such an accusation and replied that she had never done such a thing. Hesperida did not believe in this, because she did not understand why a child would voluntarily follow such a monster as Medusa. These words made the main character even more angry. In the end, the girl could not stand it any longer and decided to deal with her opponent while giving the baby to Hesperis. After this, the main character directed all her rage at Hesperida. The girl was frightened by the surprise and thought that nothing else could be expected from such a monster. Yet anger overcame fear, and so she decided to accept the challenge, threatening to show her opponent the full power of Hesperides' fiery fist. Meanwhile, Hesperida, with Percy in her arms, decided to move away, because her sister and the baby's adoptive mother were terrible creatures when they were angry. Once in a safe place, the girl began to talk to the child and asked what brought him to these places. Of course, he could not answer anything. Then Hesperida decided to tell herself that Medusa often looked after children who had nowhere to return to, so Percy was no longer her first ward. The child silently watched what was happening in the distance, while listening to the girl say that Medusa was very picky and aggressive. Hesperides continued to say that their families had particularly bad relations, and yet she saw how the main character raised children like Percy. Therefore, despite the rumors, she was 100% sure that Medusa was good, and her sisters were also not bad. The girl also told the child that from now on he would often have to watch the clashes between these two, but he should try not to think about it too negatively. The little child, of course, did not respond to this, but it seemed as if he understood every word that Hesperida said. The girl soon realized that she should have intervened in the fight before it ended in something bad, so she asked Percy to stay here quietly and then ran away. The little child sat quietly for a while, watching what was happening with incomprehension. Meanwhile, the fight continued despite Hesperida's attempts to stop her sister and the main character. Soon Percy got tired of sitting still, so he began to climb off the rock in order to walk alone. A small child, without any doubt, went forward alone, not even suspecting what was waiting for him there. After a while, Percy stopped and looked around in surprise. It turned out that the baby had already managed to go deep into the forest. It was quiet and peaceful around, but it was still not a place for children. Suddenly, the child saw a fluttering butterfly that couldn't let go of his attention so easily. The next moment, a strange sound was heard from the depths of the forest. Percy immediately forgot about the butterfly and turned his head to the side. Meanwhile, Hesperida asked her sister to calm down, because she really was guilty. The girl still decided to forgive Medusa, but only this time. Suddenly, the main character realized that she had not seen Percy for a long time, so she got scared and immediately asked the nymphs where her child was. Hesperida replied that the baby was nearby and pointed her finger to the side, but the girl was also very scared when she did not see him. The main character was furious and loudly asked how it was possible to lose a child in such a short time. Hesperides asked for forgiveness and said that she did not expect that such a small child could run away. Suddenly, the second Hesperid said that she would help Medusa find the child, because even though she was annoying her, the baby was not to blame. After that, the girls went to search. Medusa loudly called Percy's name as if she was expecting to receive some kind of answer from the small child. Hesperida was very worried about the baby and believed that he would be in danger if they did not find him sooner, because there were bad rumors in the area. Meanwhile, Percy continued to go deeper into the forest, trying to find the source of the strange sounds that attracted his attention. The child was not stopped at all by any difficulties or obstacles on the way, because he did not understand how serious all this was. Suddenly, Percy stopped and looked ahead with his big blue eyes. He found what he was looking for. The first thing the child saw was a human hand holding a long wooden stick. The mysterious figure did not immediately notice the presence of the baby and continued to go about its business in this dense forest. Finally, the stranger saw Percy and was probably surprised by his presence here. It was a woman who was holding a large, sharp axe in her hand. The dark figure silently looked at the child with suspicion, because it was really strange to see something like this here. Percy also stared at the stranger without taking his eyes off her, not even knowing what to expect from her. Meanwhile, the search was unsuccessful, so Medusa decided that in order to quickly find the child, she had no choice but to use that very method. The main character intended to ask for help from her mysterious sisters. This was clearly not so easy to do since this was the last option. Hesperida assumed that the girl was talking about the very same Medusa from the legends. At the same time, her sister thought that it would be easier to simply declare the child wanted. Someone laid out cards with mysterious pictures on the table and thought that his interlocutor was not destined to be a young lady. The girl with thick green hair that covered her face did not understand why this was so. She was told that they did not name the reason, but only voiced the fate and looked for other ways. Suddenly, someone outside burst into the room and loudly called his sisters. Those present immediately forgot about their business and looked at the uninvited guest. This guest was Medusa, who came with the Hesperid sisters. She was not at all troubled by the thought that she could disturb someone. The main character immediately declared that she needed to find someone, and therefore asked her sisters to help her with this. The girl, whose face was hidden by a piece of paper with an eye drawn on it, silently looked at her sister, still recovering from her sudden appearance. Suddenly, the girl with green hair began to scream loudly because she saw the terrible monster Medusa. The girl was very unhappy that she was called that. After this, the clairvoyant sent her client away, said that they were done for today, and hung a sign at the entrance warning of a temporary break. The owner of this establishment was the biological sister of the main character named Gray. She was not very happy that the girl interfered with her work, but still asked what happened to her. Medusa promised to give the girl 10 coffee coupons if she helped her find one person. Gray thought that was a small price to pay for the girl constantly calling her a one-eyed, gray-haired, unpleasant monster. Then the girl asked if the main character even knew who she wanted to find because she clearly felt that her sister's fate was shrouded in death. Medusa did not expect anything else from her clairvoyant sister, but she was in no hurry to answer her question. Gray continued to say that the child the girl was looking for would kill her someday. Meanwhile, Percy was still left alone with the danger. The dark figure of an unknown woman silently looked at the small child, not understanding how he could have ended up here alone in this strange forest. The large, sharp axe that the stranger held in her hand seemed to be soon to be used for its intended purpose. Medusa told her sister that she did not believe in fate, and therefore asked to find the child in any case, because she knew well that she was a master of her craft. Unexpectedly, Gray announced that she had already found him and told him that this child was the son of the gods and carried within him the fate of a hero. But now, someone big and formidable stood next to him. Hearing this, the main character immediately jumped up and ran out into the street. The Hesperides did not understand where she ran so quickly. At the same time, Gray was not at all surprised by this. Hesperida shouted after the girl and asked where she ran. Medusa briefly explained that she guessed where the child was now. Meanwhile, in the dense forest, everything was still calm and peaceful. Only the fluttering of birds occasionally disturbed the absolute silence. The sharp axe that belonged to the stranger was no longer of use to her, so it lay on the ground. The woman herself leaned over to the child and, having examined him, was surprised that he was a human being. She then suggested that this child would not have been able to get to these lands on his own. After thinking for a bit, the mysterious stranger realized that there was only one way this little one could have ended up here. The next moment, the woman assumed that Medusa was somehow involved in this. At that very moment, Percy celebrated his first word, which also happened to be the name of the main character. At this time, the girl had already come to the dragon named Radon, who was guarding the golden apple, and demanded that he give her the child. The three-headed dragon did not understand what the main character was talking about and was even surprised that she had taken someone in again, but the girl continued to insist on her own, not believing in his innocence. The Hesperid sisters apologized to the dragon and explained that they were looking for someone. Then Radon said that after a collision with Hercules, who cut off one of his heads, he generally tried to avoid people because on top of everything else they were noisy and smelled bad. Then Medusa asked the dragon to help her find the child, since he said that he was not involved in his disappearance. Hesperida was very surprised by the girl's impudence. After this, Radon began to sniff the air and soon stated that the unpleasant human smell was coming only from the direction of the main character's house. Medusa thought that it was obvious because they raised the child there, but suddenly the girl was stunned because she realized everything. At this time, Percy was safe and enjoying the apple that the stranger gave him. The woman, with a child on her shoulders, returned home carrying with her a whole armful of firewood. Suddenly, the little child turned around and looked back because he heard someone's quick steps behind him. Soon a familiar voice was heard loudly calling the baby. The stranger also turned around and saw an angry Medusa who intended to attack her while demanding that she release Percy. The girl's enthusiasm quickly disappeared when she realized that her attack was useless. The woman managed to stop her without much difficulty and remained completely unperturbed. Medusa was very surprised to see this woman, because they knew each other well. The main character fell to the ground, still not believing that she could not recognize her own sister, and attacked her. In response to this, the woman asked Medusa to stop attacking people without first figuring out who they were. Soon our heroes were already home and Medusa was preparing for a serious conversation with her family. Only Percy wasn't worried about anything. He, as always, ate an apple carefree, carefully watching what was happening. Steno, who was the eldest of the Gorgon sisters, was unhappy that the main character almost hit her and asked her not to forget that they were sisters and therefore could fight on equal terms. Medusa understood that she had screwed up, but she thought that it was not very serious. Then Steno asked if her sister had taken in a child again without permission. Urieli was glad to see her older sister and immediately began to complain about the main character for bringing a strange child into their house again. Suddenly, Steno stated that despite everything, this child was quite smart. Urieli was shocked by these words because she considered him a threat to them all. Then Steno said that she found him in the forest, and after talking to him a little, she realized that the child was smart and figured out. Medusa did not understand how this was possible because Percy could not talk yet. To this, the woman stated in a mysterious voice that despite the fact that the child was not yet at the age to chat, she still felt everything. She went on to say that this little boy hid the dignity of a strong person, and she felt a power that could not be suppressed, no matter how deeply it was hidden. Hearing this, Urieli was alarmed because she assumed that her older sister was going to let Medusa do whatever she wanted and leave this child. Steno replied that even though he heard all the explanations, the situation was still difficult, so she thought that they should have listened to the main character. The woman continued to say that even though this child was their enemy, they should have left him since he was not causing any problems. Medusa was very happy to hear this. Urieli did not agree with this and reminded that if this baby was left, then Medusa could be in danger. Steno knew about this but decided not to change her mind. The joyful main character asked her sister to stop worrying about this and not to patronize her so much. After this, the girl took the child in her arms, continuing to rejoice that he was now staying with her. Medusa continued to say that this baby hadn't even spoken yet, so he definitely wasn't capable of killing anyone, and even if that happened, it would be in the very distant future. The next moment, the main character suddenly fell silent because she heard Percy calling her name. At first, the girl did not believe what had happened and thought that she had simply misheard. So she began to listen attentively, hoping that the child would say something else. Steno was also very surprised by what happened and kept her eyes closely watching the little child. At the same time, Urieli was very scared and trembled with fear because she believed that all this was not without reason. Percy looked at the Gorgon sisters surrounding him with incomprehension because he didn't know what he had done to attract their attention so much. The next moment, the little child again said the name of the main character, and now no one doubted that they had not misheard it. Medusa asked in surprise if her charges had learned to speak. Steno thoughtfully confirmed this. Urieli was still very scared because she believed that the sinister child was growing by leaps and bounds and would therefore soon reveal its true nature. Little Percy was left unattended while the sisters were talking among themselves, so he quickly decided to fix that. The child grabbed Medusa's clothes and began to pull them hard, trying to attract the attention of his adoptive mother. The girl immediately asked him what had happened. The main character asked the baby not to be capricious and not to distract them while they were talking. Urieli warned her sister to be careful because she still did not trust this child. Medusa then thought that Percy was being capricious because he was hungry or was trying to take her somewhere. Urieli suggested that he was going to take her to the afterlife. Meanwhile, the child showed with his whole appearance that he had something to say, but he was not understood and for which he was unhappy. Still, the girl thought that Percy was hungry and quickly prepared food for him and began to feed him. The child began to eat, but it was clear that this was not the reason for his unusual behavior. Soon the baby demonstrated this when he began to spit out food. The main character was surprised by this and was upset because now she did not understand exactly what the reason was. The girl immediately began to ask what happened to the child, trying to get at least some kind of answer from him. Urieli tried to say something, but her sister interrupted her, not wanting to listen to more moralizing. However, the girl continued to speak and suggested that the child wanted to go outside because he was pulling Medusa as if he wanted to go somewhere. The main character was surprised by this assumption, but Percy's appearance indicated that Urieli was indeed right. Steno also agreed with her sister because when the child returned home with her, he looked happy, so one could assume that he just wanted to be in the fresh air. Medusa began to doubt this idea because it was not so easy to implement. The girl was worried that they would lose the child again if he went alone, because last time Percy only found Steno by a lucky chance and returned with her. After this, Medusa began to think because she needed to come up with some way to leave the child in the house. Soon the girl found an easy way to safely leave the house with Percy, but she still got hurt. However, it was still necessary to decide how to safely walk with the child on the street. For this, the main character decided to turn to the Hesperid sisters for help. The first method that Medusa came up with was to swaddle a small child and take it on her back. This was the simplest and most ancient method. The girl believed that since she and the child were now firmly attached to each other, she had no chance of losing him. The main character was already happy that she managed to solve the problem so easily, but Urieli said that her sister still missed something. The girl immediately asked what she had missed, but at the same time she did not notice how something was approaching her from the side at great speed. The next moment something quickly flew right past Medusa's face, barely missing, seriously injuring her. After that, this object hit the tree straight away, causing the ringing sound of the impact to spread around. The blow was quite strong, and the object was so small that it penetrated very deeply into the tree. Urieli was terrified that a stone had come out of nowhere, and thought that there was a high probability of terrible, unfortunate things happening while the child was near her sister. The girl also suggested that if Medusa were to walk around hugging Percy all day, something like this could happen many more times. That is why one could consider that the first attempt was a failure. Fortunately, the main character got away with only a small scratch on her nose. The second way was to take the baby in a stroller. Although it was a little inconvenient, it allowed me to keep at least some distance from Percy. Next, the main character decided to try this method and make a small circle with the stroller. At first, everything looked good. The girl was able to easily control the stroller and guide it in the right direction. Very soon, everything changed. For some reason, the main character found it difficult to control the stroller because it seemed like it was not obeying her. Sometime later, Medusa almost fell to the ground after tripping over some obstacle. Urieli, seeing this, decided that this method was also not suitable. Medusa was already starting to get angry because she couldn't do anything, but she still thought that she would definitely succeed the third time. The third way was to simply tie a rope to Percy and thus prevent him from running far from the girl. However, this was useless, since the child was still too small to walk on his own. Not having achieved the desired result, Medusa and Urieli agreed that this method was also not suitable. Meanwhile, Steno sat to the side and diligently peeled apples, thinking at the same time that she absolutely had to try. Even the screams of her sisters could not distract her from this process. However, the main character still had some ideas, one of which was to tie the child to the balloons. Urieli thought that it looked dangerous because the weather conditions could affect it. After this, Medusa suggested that she could hold Percy in a king-sized hoop and thus move around with him. The girl was also ready to use virtual reality glasses in order to walk with the child in the virtual world. Of course, all these methods were not suitable, which is why the main character was upset. Urieli suggested that they could leave the child walking near the house and not take him anywhere. Medusa thought it was unsafe and suggested that it would be better if her sister simply took the child in her arms and followed her around all day. Urieli, of course, did not agree with this, which is why the quarrel began. Suddenly, someone turned to the girls and asked if they were making noise again. One of the Hesperids said hello and, apologizing for the last time, said that she was interested in how the child chewed, so she and her sister came here. Medusa immediately began to get angry and say that if the girl was interested, she should have come alone, after which she began to chase the girl's sister away. The second Hesperid replied that she also did not want to come here, but could not leave her sister alone. The girl also stated that all the Gorgon sisters were complete losers. These words made the main character very angry. At the same time, Urieli did not attach any importance to this and decided to simply observe everything from the side. A moment later, Medusa and Hesperides began to loudly threaten each other, intending to start a fight at any moment. However, it never came to a fight because someone came up to the girls from behind and asked why they were making so much noise. Medusa and Hesperides saw this person and were immediately frightened. Even though this man was holding a basket of freshly boiled potatoes, he still looked ominous and dangerous. It turned out that it was Steno, who was clearly unhappy with the extra noise. The girl remained just as menacing but was surprised that they had guests, so she asked her sisters to peel potatoes for a snack in order to treat them. She also did not forget about what had just happened and asked if the girls were really going to fight. Medusa and Hesperides immediately began to deny this and said that they were good friends. Steno was pleased with this and suggested enjoying potatoes together. Very soon, everyone was sitting quietly in their places and having lunch. One of the Hesperid sisters was glad that she had the opportunity to feed Percy. Unexpectedly, Steno asked if the main character had managed to solve the problem with walking with the child. The girl replied that she did not have the necessary method yet. The girl said that they had already tried a lot of things, but everything was too stressful. So she figured that they needed to wait until Percy learned to walk on his own. Steno heard this and thought about it, surprised at how her sister solved problems. Suddenly, the girl pointed at Percy, drawing her sister's attention to him. The main character was shocked when she saw what was happening. It turned out that the child was able to stand on his own feet and was already trying to take his first steps. One of the Hesperid sisters was also very surprised by this. Medusa looked at the child with admiration and literally glowed with happiness in anticipation of what would happen next. Nevertheless, the joyful girl took the baby in her arms, saying along the way that it was the first time she had met such a developed child. She also suggested that now they would be able to walk together. On this occasion, the girl suggested throwing a party and even invited the Hesperid sisters to eat with them. One of the sisters was really happy about what happened and therefore accepted the invitation, but the second one was not enthusiastic and said that she would just go home. Suddenly, Steno again assumed a menacing appearance and briefly suggested that everyone go eat. Hesperida was immediately dumbfounded on the spot because now she was afraid to refuse this offer. Having received no answer, Steno again suggested that the girl go eat, so she had to agree. After that, our heroines had a delicious meal. Some time passed. The Gorgon sisters' house was again restless. Steno and Urieli tried to somehow abstract themselves from the noise that was spreading around, but they failed. Little Percy was unhappy about something again, which caused him to cry loudly and rock on the floor. At this time, the exhausted Medusa, not knowing what to do, just lay on the floor and smiled from hopelessness. Urieli was surprised because she had never seen a child so insane. Steno asked the main character not to strain herself so much, because stress could make her go bald. Medusa herself understood everything perfectly well, so she asked her sisters to refrain from commenting if they did not want to help her. It all started 40 minutes ago. Medusa, full of enthusiasm, suggested to her sister that she go and say hello to the family today. Urieli didn't seem thrilled with the idea, so she asked if she really had to go too. The girl replied that Urieli's presence was necessary because if they suddenly went for a walk and something happened to her, she would not want Percy to be left alone. The main character also said that she had already rummaged through the closet and collected all the clothes that a child could wear, so she suggested that her sister quickly get ready and hit the road. Medusa was very happy to confirm that all these clothes were for Percy and said that this time they would go to Aunt Gray and Uncle Radon, who were helping them. The next moment, the girl was in a hurry because she saw that Percy had already chosen his own clothes and put them on. Medusa and Urieli were more shocked by what was happening and also by the appearance of the little child now. Percy turned out to really like his new look, which emphasized his individuality. At the same time, Medusa was slightly puzzled because she did not understand why the child put on winter clothes even though it was hot outside. Still, she assumed that he did it because it looked unusual. The main character also assumed that the child himself was delighted with these clothes, and seeing Percy's eyes, she was convinced that she was right. However, the girl thought that this was too much. She did not know what the world of people in which the child had lived before was like. Everything was different here. Medusa told the baby that this place was guarded by gods, so they did not have a change of seasons and therefore winter clothes were not relevant here. Soon the girl saw that because of these words, Percy was very upset and almost started to cry. The main character immediately tried to quickly calm him down. She hastily grabbed the first piece of clothing that came to hand and said with a smile that there were plenty of beautiful outfits here that the child could choose for himself. Medusa continued to persuade the baby to choose other clothes, considering that they suited him much better. However, from the expression on Percy's face, it was clear that he did not agree with this. This disagreement soon showed itself. The main character, who was happily spinning around in place, suddenly caught on the uneven floor. The next moment, the girl began to lose her balance, and it seemed that she was about to fall to the floor with a crash. Medusa tried as best she could to react and maintain her balance while loudly addressing the child. Still, it worked. The girl managed to stay on her feet and not fall, so she thought that now even if she suddenly started to fall, it would not be so easy. At this time, Urieli silently watched what was happening from the sidelines, believing that all this was a big misunderstanding and absurdity. After this, the main character continued to show little Percy various outfits and ask him to choose something from this, but the child was still unhappy. Soon the child decided to demonstrate his displeasure again and grabbed Medusa by the hair, began to pull it and scream loudly. The girl also began to scream and ask her sister not to stand there like a pillar and to help quickly, but Urieli was afraid to even approach the child. For some time, Percy continued to show his dissatisfaction so that his choice would be approved by the girl. Finally, Urieli suggested to her sister to leave everything as it was, but the main character replied that she could not allow the child to go outside in winter clothes. After this, the girl turned to Percy and asked if he really wanted to see his mother die. The child was still offended. Urieli again advised her sister to either accept her choice of clothes or stay home and not go anywhere. Medusa asked the girl not to get into trouble and threatened her. Behind all this, the girls did not notice that Steno was standing silently not far from them, watching what was happening and meticulously thinking about something. Still, the girl suggested that perhaps it really was better to leave everything as it was, because no matter how much Medusa explained, Percy was still a child who did not fully understand everything. Percy was unhappy that they doubted him and underestimated his choice, but it was better than giving up the clothes he liked. Very soon the main character and her child went out for a walk. As expected, the bright warm sun was waiting for them outside. Medusa felt quite comfortable, and in order to protect her eyes from the bright sun rays, she put on her favorite black glasses. At the same time, Percy seemed to feel some discomfort, because of which he did not feel any joy from winning the argument with the girl. Medusa enjoyed the upcoming walk, while saying that today was a very warm and sunny day. Very soon, as expected, Percy began to feel even more discomfort from wearing winter clothes on such a warm day. The main character suggested that the child go on a journey, but immediately realized that something had happened to him. Percy didn't want to admit he was wrong, so he didn't complain, but it was also clearly visible from his facial expression. The main character immediately realized that the child, as expected, was hot. She was very pleased that in the end she was right. Still, she suggested that Percy go home and change clothes, while thinking about the fact that the children really didn't understand anything until they experienced it themselves. Soon they returned home and began to choose new clothes for the child. Urieli saw this. The girl silently watched her sister and the baby from around the corner, thinking about something at the same time. Soon after, she went outside and turned to her sister Steno, prepared to listen to her, not understanding what was troubling her. Urieli asked if the girl was really going to allow Medusa to continue raising this child. Steno did not understand this question, because it seemed that they had already decided everything about this. Urieli continued speaking, assuming that Medusa had already gotten used to the child and therefore did not notice that he brought her nothing but misfortune. The girl was very afraid that now it could turn out to be something harmless, but in the end, it could cause the death of her sister. So they had to do something to prevent this from happening. Steno was surprised that her sister raised this topic again and was about to say something about it, but Urieli interrupted her. The girl explained that she did not suggest that the full one torture the child, but Medusa was their precious sister and therefore she should at least somehow help. Urieli, without being distracted from her work, replied that there was indeed some truth in Urieli's words, but one should not forget that Medusa was very kind, although she could be rude at times. That's why she would never listen to her sisters if they suggested getting rid of Percy. Steno was also afraid that if they did everything themselves, it would break the main character's heart. Meanwhile, Medusa and Percy had already reached Radon. As expected, the path for the girl was not easy. Steno continued to say that now all they could do was keep an eye on their sister and this child. This was the best they could do to protect her. However, Urieli was not sure that this decision was correct, because she did not know how she could accept this child. At this time, despite her injuries, a joyful and happy Medusa showed Radon her ward. Urieli continued to tell her sister that she could not love a child who not only brought misfortune, but could also kill her beloved younger sister. Steno saw how hard it was for Urieli, and so she decided to cheer her up. The girl put her hand on her sister's head and said that she understood perfectly well what she was feeling now. However, she asked Urieli not to make hasty decisions. To this, the girl only remained silent. Still, Urieli thought that her sister was very stupid, and she needed to do something before Percy's presence brought trouble. The girl felt that she simply had to do something to protect Medusa. Percy could already confidently walk on his own feet, taking confident steps from side to side. This stomping distracted Urieli, so she asked her sister to calm the child down. Medusa reluctantly turned to the baby and told him to calm down because his aunt didn't like it. To Percy's surprise, he stopped right there. The main character did not expect this from the child and said that it was just a request from Urieli that should not be taken seriously. However, the baby seemed to freeze in place. It was the first time the girl had seen this fidget simply stop like that. However, everything was not so simple. Percy looked closely at his feet and thought about something. After that, he sat down on the floor and began to examine the wooden surface as if he was trying to get some information about it. Urieli and Medusa carefully watched the actions of the child who had already risen to his feet because they did not understand what could be expected from him. The next moment, little Percy ran forward as fast as he could, which surprised the girls greatly. Medusa immediately came to her senses and forgot about her business, not expecting this from a child. The main character was speechless because she was shocked by how easily a small child ran around the room. The girl could not hold back her tears because this was a historical moment that needed to be captured in a photograph. At the same time, Urieli was unhappy that this distracted them from their work. Medusa didn't listen to her sister and began to photograph little Percy from all angles, which only made the girl even more soaked. The main character turned to the child and began to praise him for being so amazing, after which she suggested that he go outside and take a photo of him there. At this point, Urieli realized that she would not be able to finish the work there today, as she no longer had an assistant, which she was very happy about. Very soon, Medusa and Percy went outside where, as always, the weather was beautiful and sunny. The little child willingly posed for the camera while surrounded by bright flowers. Medusa was amazed at how beautiful and smart her baby was, so she immediately took one photo after another. At the same time, the girl thought that she had very successfully stolen the flowers to annoy Hesperida, because now she could use them as a photo zone. Meanwhile, Percy turned his attention to a large red flower. The main character said that these flowers were from the Garden of the Hesperides and were simply amazing. The girl also said that in fact, most of the local flowers were created because of the anger or whims of the gods, but she was glad that because of this, they had such a beautiful landscape. Little Percy found this story boring, so he continued to look at the flower without looking away and seemed to be thinking about something. The unexpected child began to open his mouth as if he wanted to try to eat this red flower. Medusa noticed this in time and explained to the baby that they couldn't be eaten because the flowers were only needed to simply hold them in your hands and admire their beauty. Oddly enough, the child understood everything and therefore looked with regret at the flower that he could not eat. Still, Percy left this one for money and looked at the main character as if he was trying to ask her for something. The little child made some vague sounds, but Medusa managed to understand that Percy wanted to hold her camera in his hands. The kid confirmed this guess, but was immediately refused because the camera was expensive and could also be dangerous for him. Having received a refusal, Percy immediately began to look at the girl with an offended expression. Medusa asked him to stop doing this and explained that the camera was too heavy for him. Then the child began to act up, trying to get what he wanted. The main character was unhappy that the baby again began to be stubborn like a bull. Percy continued to insist on his own, and so the girl decided to explain to him why the camera could be so dangerous for him. Suddenly, the main character fell silent because she felt something strange. As it turned out, you instantly pointed out where a huge bird appeared and flew up to Medusa and grabbed the camera that she was holding in her hand. Percy watched in great surprise as the griffin, having received what he wanted, flew high into the sky. This mythical creature had the body of a lion and the head of an eagle, and among other things, was very fond of shiny things. Despite its size, the griffin was incredibly strong and was therefore able to lift the main character, who had no intention of letting go of her camera. It all looked very funny, but Medusa was not laughing. She screamed loudly at the griffin and demanded that he immediately let her go. Despite the girl's screams and discontent, the mythical creature continued to fly no further than its strength allowed. Urieli, hearing a strange noise, went outside to find out what happened, but saw only Percy there, who was looking attentively at the sky. The girl followed the child's example and also looked at the sky, already understanding that something bad had happened. Soon she was surprised to see her sister being carried away by a griffin. Urieli was shocked and did not understand what the girl was doing, because fighting a griffin with a camera in her hands was dangerous. Some species of eagles fed on snakes, so the bird took a liking to the hair of the main character, who demanded to be left alone. Urieli continued to watch what was happening, not understanding why her sister was fighting with the griffin. Still, she assumed that all these troubles were because of Percy, who suddenly began to go somewhere. It turned out that the little child, with his small steps, confidently walked towards the griffin and Medusa, who had already descended to the ground. The main character saw Percy and was very surprised because she did not understand why he was coming here, even though it was dangerous for him. Suddenly, a small, fearless child attacked the griffin and began to attack it, intending to drive the bird away and help the main character. Surprisingly, it worked. The griffin didn't bother with Percy and flew away empty-handed. The jellyfish who was watching what was happening was shocked that a small child managed to chase away the bird and thought that it was simply incredible. After this, the girl explained that the baby should not have rushed at the griffin and hit it because it was a dangerous predator. To this, Percy only approached Medusa and hugged her, showing his love, which greatly impressed the girl. The main character instantly experienced an unusual feeling that made her nervous and made it difficult for her to speak. The little child watched Medusa's reaction with great surprise because he had never seen her like this before. The girl with tears in her eyes asked Percy if he would do this to save her. Despite the dramatic nature of the moment, the main character looked terrible. Medusa was very touched by the child's action, but he was still shocked after what he saw and did not show any emotions. After this, the girl took the baby in her arms and began to kiss him, thus demonstrating her gratitude. Urieli continued to watch all this from the side. The girl thought that the child seemed good, but she was sure that it was because of him that everything happened. The girl continued to look at Percy and think that now she could laugh at this random incident, which fortunately ended well. However, Urieli was sure that sooner or later Medusa could again find herself in danger because of this child. She was very afraid that ridiculous incidents would happen more and more often each time. Nothing could change the fact that Urieli considered Percy dangerous, and therefore she had to do something urgently. After some time, deep night came. The bright full moon now served as almost the only source of light on the street. At this late hour, the doors to the room where Percy was sleeping suddenly opened, after which someone entered the room with the thought that he needed to do something. This caused the little child to immediately wake up and calmly look at the uninvited guest. It turned out that it was Urieli who came here to carry out her plan. The girl put her index finger to her lips, showing the child that he shouldn't make noise. Under cover of night, Urieli snuck into the room where Percy was sleeping and asked the child to follow her. The kid looked at the girl with incomprehension, trying to understand why she felt tenderness from him at such a late hour. Urieli humbly waited for the child to fulfill her request, but this hope was in vain. Then the girl again asked Percy to follow her, because they needed to go somewhere. However, the child still looked at his aunt with distrust, but soon decided to trust her. After this, Urieli and Percy left the room in which Medusa was also fast asleep. The snakes that replaced the main character's hair were also completely immersed in sleep. After some time, Urieli, with the child in her arms, was already making her way through the forest, illuminating her path with a small burning candle. Percy seemed to sense that something was wrong, but he couldn't influence it since they were already far from home. Urieli walked through the impenetrable darkness and told the child that Medusa was different from her and their older sister. The girl also said that her sister was doomed to death from birth, because the prophecy said that the snake-headed monster would be defeated at the hands of a hero. That is why she and her sisters took refuge in a place far from people, hoping that this measure would protect Medusa. However, in the end, it turned out that the girl began to pick up orphans without a home and look after them. Urieli believed that her sister was the most unusual creature, and at the same time kinder than any of them. Percy listened attentively to this story, as if he understood every word, while looking ahead and trying to understand where they were going. Suddenly, Urieli stopped and a strange noise was heard nearby. The girl raised the burning candle higher in order to better illuminate the space around, and said that they had already arrived at the right place. Percy, although he was a stupid child, looked ahead and was very surprised, as if this place was very familiar to him. As it turned out, Urieli brought the baby to the sea, the water of which in the darkness of the night seemed absolutely black, and its waves loudly retreated to the shore. At this time, one of Medusa's snakes suddenly woke up as if it sensed something was wrong. She quickly looked around. It seemed that everything was as usual, but the snake already knew that this was not the case. Then she approached Medusa's face and began to hiss, trying to wake the girl up. Of course, she failed to do this, which is why the snake got angry and decided to resort to radical methods. The next moment, the snake bit the main character on the cheek with all its might, causing the girl to immediately wake up and begin to loudly scold her. Medusa was very unhappy that the snake had interrupted her sleep and assumed that she had decided to start a riot. However, this was not at all the case. The snake explained to the girl as best she could what had happened. Medusa looked at the snake in surprise, as if she did not believe what she had just heard. At this time, the raging waves continued to hit the shore, simultaneously creating a loud noise. Percy sat in the wooden box and watched carefully what Urieli was doing. The girl turned to the child and asked if he had ever sailed on a boat, and then remembered that he had arrived on this island in a wooden box similar to his. Then she asked the baby not to worry, because she would not throw him away like those shameless people, but she believed that it was time for him to leave here. After this, the boat set off from the shore, cutting through the water surface along the way. Urieli intended to send the child back to where he came from, and so she was now sailing with him in a small boat. Percy didn't fully understand what was happening, and so she just looked overboard and peered out into the water surface. Urieli said that they would cross the river into the human world, and after the child returned, no one would consider him annoying. The girl believed that Percy would become one of the strangers, and that Medusa would live in safety. The child realized that the girl was talking about the main character and therefore unexpectedly said her name. To this, Urieli confirmed that she was talking about Medusa, after which she asked the child to hold on tighter because the time had come. From the expression on Percy's face, it was clear that he did not understand what was happening at all, but he was in no hurry to be capricious and showed dissatisfaction. Suddenly something alarmed the child, and so he looked overboard a long time ago. It seemed that the baby saw something and tried to tell the girl about it, but Urieli did not understand him. Still, she assumed that Percy was trying to tell her about ghosts, and thought it was normal for a child who was seeing the sea for the first time. After that, she asked the baby not to jump into the water because the sea was too big, and she would not be able to save him if he started to drown. Urieli was also worried that for some reason the boat stood still, no matter how hard she tried to row with her weight. This began to anger her. Without moving from the spot, the girl assumed that the sea current was going in the other direction, but the wind was definitely blowing in their direction. At this time, several air bubbles rose from the depths of the sea to the surface of the water, which were not noticed by the girl. Urieli looked around and assumed that all this was strange. She also did not notice the huge dark figure that was right under the water. At this time, the alarmed Medusa ran into her sister's room and loudly asked her to wake up. Steno replied that she was no longer asleep. Then the main character, unable to contain her emotions, said that Percy and Urieli had disappeared somewhere. Steno asked her sister to calm down and speak more clearly. Soon the girls got ready and opened the exit door to go outside, but suddenly stopped. They saw footprints that went straight from the threshold of their house and disappeared somewhere into the darkness. At this time, Urieli was still wondering why the boat was not moving while Percy was looking at the water surface and trying to get her attention. Since Urieli was prone to quickly abandoning her ideas, she assumed that her whole undertaking was useless and that deporting the child was too difficult. These thoughts were suddenly interrupted by Percy, who began not to give in to loud sounds because he still wanted to attract the girl's attention. Urieli was very angry about this, and so she began to loudly ask why the child was making so much noise because she was going to send him home. To this, Percy began to make the same sounds along and point to the water surface. The girl did not understand what these sounds meant, which made her even angrier. Still, she assumed that the child wanted to tell her that there was something wrong with the water. To confirm this assumption, Percy again pointed his finger at the water surface, implying that there was something dangerous overboard. Urieli immediately calmed down and began to think about what could have alarmed the child so much. After that, the girl looked overboard, exactly where Percy was pointing. The next moment, she saw a lot of air bubbles begin to rise to the surface of the water, which was clearly not a good sign. Still, Urieli realized that right now she and the child were in danger, which made her nervous. At the same time, Percy continued to look at the water surface and waited for what would happen next. At this time, the Hesperid sisters, returning home, decided to take a night walk. The nymphs were obliged to guard the garden of the Hesperides until the end of their days, so they were only now returning from the night shift, which one of the Hesperides was unhappy about. Suddenly the girl stopped and looked to the side, and was surprised to see that someone else was taking a walk at such a late hour. Her sister also looked into the distance and saw two dark figures who were quickly walking somewhere, lighting their way with a torch. The girl assumed that they were the Gorgon sisters. The second Hesperides agreed with this guess but thought that this time they looked very angry. It was indeed so. The dissatisfied Medusa quickly walked forward, angry at Urieli along the way. Her older sister shared these feelings. The main character continued to say that the child should not have been taken outside at such a late hour, after which she asked Steno what she was doing while Urieli was arranging this. Steno tried to justify herself by saying that she did not know that her sister would do something like that. These breaks did not calm the angry Medusa. After this, the girl said that she was tired of everything, and that she could no longer live with Urieli. Steno understood his sister's feelings, but such words did not make her happy. The main character was very unhappy that her sister had been talking nonsense under her breath all day long, and now she had decided to steal Percy. Then the girl said again that after this she would no longer be able to live with her sister. Steno did not say anything about this, but from her facial expression it was clear that she was unhappy. Meanwhile, Urieli and Percy peered closely at the water's surface, not understanding what they should expect. Suddenly air bubbles began to rise from under the water again, indicating that there was someone under the water. The next moment some creature quickly burst out without water, which greatly frightened Urieli. The girl grabbed Percy in her arms and began to peer at the suddenly appeared monster, trying to understand what it was. A huge snake was looking straight at the girl, its eyes shining brightly in the darkness of the night. Urieli did not take her eyes off the monster, and I assumed that it was one of Scylla's monsters. The girl didn't expect to see it here. It should have been in hibernation by now. Still, she turned to the monster and asked him not to attack them, because she was familiar with Scylla and went to the same art school with her. The monster did not react to these words in any way and continued to stare at Urieli, but it seemed that he was no longer going to attack. Of course, everything was not so simple. A moment later, the monster opened its mouth and showed several rows of its sharp teeth as if saying that it would not be possible to negotiate with it. After this, Urieli realized that she had serious problems, but she did not know what to do about it. Soon the monster tried to attack our heroes but missed. Nevertheless, Percy and Urieli were very scared of this. The girl did not understand why the monster attacked them and assumed that just a little more and they would become a snack for him. At this time, the frightened child tried to cuddle up to his aunt. Urieli was very surprised by this, considering the kind of relationship they had. The child looked closely at the water surface, very afraid of a repeat of the monster's attack. After this, Percy looked at Urieli in the hope that she could find some way out of this situation. The girl was very surprised to see the child's frightened eyes and felt guilty about it. In order to calm the baby, Urieli pressed him to you and asked him to hold on tighter. After that, she looked the child straight in the eyes and invited him to return home together. At the same time, the girl thought that she didn't understand at all what she was supposed to do, and that made it even scarier. The next moment, the huge monster again erupted from the water and attacked our heroes, damaging their boat. The frightened girl assumed that the monster was going to eat everything at once, so she urgently needed to do something. At this time, the satisfied monster carefully chewed what he had managed to bite off from the wooden boat. The next moment, Urieli heard a familiar, saving voice behind her addressing her. The girl immediately turned around and looked into the distance in surprise. Urieli saw her sister standing knee-deep in water and loudly asking why she took the child and where this monster came from. This distracted the girl, so she did not notice the approach of the monster, who grabbed her and began to lift her up. Medusa, seeing this, asked her sister to be patient while she and Steno turned this monster into a statue. However, the problem was that the main character could only transform his statue of those with whom she met her gaze. This fish had very small eyes, so the girl did not understand where she was looking. Suddenly, Steno said that first they should throw a rope and save Percy. Very soon they managed to do this and the child grabbed the rope. Medusa asked Percy to hold on tight and not to let her go, but the baby didn't listen because he was looking in a completely different direction. Percy watched as Urieli tried desperately to get out of the monster's tenacious grip, but she was unable to do so. This made the little child think about something, as if he was trying to make some important decision. Urieli continued to scream and call for help because she could not get out on her own. Percy continued to think about what was happening and seemed to have finally made a decision. Medusa and Steno were very surprised when they saw that the little child was in no hurry to get out of the water and return to the shore. Urieli also noticed that Percy was acting strangely and therefore did not understand what to expect from him. Meanwhile, the little child looked fearlessly at the monster, preparing to do what he had planned. The next moment, Percy pushed off strongly from the water surface and flew straight towards the monster and attacked it, causing the monster to immediately release Urieli. Medusa was shocked by what was happening, because this could not be expected from a small child. Meanwhile, Percy felt absolutely confident and was completely focused on his business. Soon, Percy and Urieli began to fall down. Medusa, very frightened for the child, began to put her hands forward in order to catch him. However, the girl managed to do this, and therefore the baby was not harmed. Everything seemed to be fine with Urieli, who fell into the water. Still worried, the main character praised the child and was surprised at how he even got the courage to hit this monster. Meanwhile, the monster, having received only injuries instead of what it wanted, quickly disappeared into the sea, so as not to bring even more guilt upon itself. The Gorgon sisters watched in surprise as the monster ran away from them and did not believe that the worst was already behind them. Soon Medusa turned to her sister to talk to her. Urieli was already trying to explain her actions, but she was interrupted by Percy's voice. The girls immediately forgot about everything and looked at the little child. We need to find out what he wanted to say. Suddenly, the joyful little boy said the word ant and the name of the main character, which indicated that he had learned another word. Medusa and Urieli were so moved by this that they looked at each other silently, feeling awkward. Still, the sisters agreed that it would be best for them to talk about everything at home. Soon all our heroes returned home, and now they had a difficult conversation about what had happened. Urieli admitted that even for the sake of her beloved sister, she should not have taken such risks, and therefore she asked for forgiveness from Medusa and Percy. The main character accepted these changes without further ado, because she saw no point in being offended by her sister for long. Urieli was truly shocked that the girl forgave her so easily. Medusa did not understand why her sister had such a reaction. The girl explained that it was really hard for her to just turn a blind eye to her actions because it was very dangerous, but she would still forgive her because Percy liked her. Urieli was surprised by this and did not understand how she could have earned the trust of this little child whom she initially disliked. Medusa continued to say that the baby called her sister Aunt. She of course taught him this, but did not understand how he was able to remember it. Urieli was very embarrassed after receiving forgiveness from her loved ones. Steno was glad that her sisters had finally made peace and also decided to ask for forgiveness for not keeping an eye on them, hoping that they would all discuss problems more often and make decisions together. Now Medusa was also as embarrassed as Urieli. At the same time, the girls laughed and rejoiced that everything had been decided exactly this way. Unexpectedly, Percy called the name of the main character, said the word ant and truce, from which one could conclude that he was also pleased. Medusa was very surprised that the child had learned another word. She had met many children, but this was the first time she had seen such smart ones. Urieli thought that it was obvious because this little one was destined to become a hero. Suddenly, Medusa heard a knock on the door and went to see who had come to them. At this time, Urieli taught Percy another word. The main character opened the front door and looked at the street with distrust, seeing a familiar face. It turned out that the Hesperid sisters had come to visit our heroes. One of them, as always, was nervous and hiding behind her sister. Medusa was not happy to see them, and therefore was about to close the doors. Hesperida was unhappy with this, because she and her sister were worried about them, and therefore came to make sure that everything was okay. The sisters said that yesterday on their way home, they saw Medusa and Steno hurrying somewhere, and therefore they guessed that something had happened to the child. Suddenly Percy's loud voice was heard, joyfully shouting that Medusa was a fool. It was this new word that Urieli taught the child. Hearing this, everyone who was in the room immediately began to laugh loudly, and only the main character was not laughing. She was angry. One of the Hesperid sisters was surprised at how quickly Percy was developing, although not in the right direction. She also assumed that at this rate the child would soon be able to read books on his own. Medusa agreed with this, but believed that in this situation the little child was simply imitating the adults who were now receiving their punishment. Steno thought that Percy's speed of development and learning was truly first class, so the girl thought that he could already be taught simple phrases. To this, the main character said that children needed to be taught only good things, after which she asked the child to say the word, "thank you." At that very moment, the little child tried to say this word, but he was not able to do it at all. Because of this, Percy immediately felt an unpleasant feeling, and in order to get rid of it, he again tried to say the word, "thank you." However, no matter how hard the little boy tried, he still couldn't do anything. Medusa was surprised because before this she thought that it was easy as pie for Percy. At the same time, Urieli and Hesperides could not hold back their laughter. Steno assumed that the child was still unable to handle long words, so now he needed to be taught short words. Hearing this, the main character thought about what words of 2, 3 syllables she could teach Percy. Unexpectedly, one of the Hesperides suggested learning the names of animals and plants, since she had just brought a couple of books with her. Soon our heroes were already sorting through books, among a large number of which were a children's dictionary and stories about Hercules, Troy, Greece, and much more. Urieli felt nostalgic because she used to love reading such books. Medusa offered one of them to Percy, and it seemed that he really liked it. The little child immediately began to examine page after page, while the main character recalled that she had never seen these books. Hesperida was surprised how someone like Medusa could have such a sweet and smart child. The main character did not like these words, which is why the conflict was brewing again. Luckily, Steno quickly intervened and calmed the girls down. She then said that there really weren't any books in their house that could be trusted to Percy. This meant that they needed to find more interesting things for the child, because Urieli's things were very creepy. After this, Steno, without changing her stern look, expressed her gratitude to the sisters of Hesperides, because thanks to them, they learned something important. One of the Hesperides felt awkward and pine-like in the girl's appearance. Along the way, Medusa suggested that they should take a walk and buy a few necessary things. Steno thought that it was a good thing because for the first time in a long time they would go to the market with the whole family. The main character was very glad that her sister supported her. Only Urieli was not delighted and asked if it was necessary because it was obvious that Percy liked the book she had read earlier. Steno replied that no matter how smart a child was, he was still a child, and therefore he needed toys that were appropriate for his age. Urieli still agreed, but suddenly heard Percy pronouncing new words without taking his eyes off the book. Hesperida was already going to take this book away because she thought that it would be too difficult for the child. In return, she wanted to give him another book. Suddenly the girl was very surprised and stopped because Percy said another new word. It seemed that it was not difficult for him to learn new words at all. Soon everyone in the room listened with great surprise as a small child read about how the Trojans ran into the city like frightened deer. Percy, despite his age, continued to confidently read a passage from the Iliad, which was written by the ancient Greek poet Homer. Everyone was shocked by how easily the child managed to learn to read, and so no one dared to stop him. Urieli quietly asked if they really should buy the baby something new. Steno remained unconvinced and said that no matter how well Percy read poems, he was still a child. Medusa thought that it was right, and therefore there was no need to put pressure on the child. She also said that they should have raised him well, so that in the future he would become a genius. After this, one of the Hesperides suggested leaving Percy his books. Medusa agreed to this and then asked the girls to get lost, which angered one of the Hesperides. Nevertheless, the girls decided that it was really time for them to leave, and in the end, they wished our heroes good luck with their child's education. Suddenly, Steno approached the Hesperid sisters and invited them to stay for dinner. The girls politely refused. Medusa also thought that it was better for them to leave. Only after this did the Hesperid sisters say goodbye to our heroines and finally leave to the delight of Medusa. Steno thought that they should have dinner with the girls, but Medusa wasn't thrilled with the idea. After this, the main character suggested thinking about what they should buy for Percy. The older sister agreed with this. Medusa also turned to Urieli and asked if she would go with them to the market. The girl was surprised and reluctantly accepted this offer. However, she quickly began to change her mind about the idea when she looked at her sister and Percy. Medusa smiled sincerely and hoped that the girl would go with them. At this time, Percy looked at Urieli with wide eyes. In order to make sure that he convinced the girl, the little child decided to use all his skills and all his charm. Urieli could not resist this and still agreed. Nevertheless, the Gorgon sisters, realizing the full talent of the child who was destined to become a hero, went to the market. But before that, the main character suddenly turned to Percy, and to the child's great surprise, asked if he could stay home while they went shopping. The girl promised that they would return soon. Percy was surrounded by many soft toys as the main character put him to bed. The little child was very unhappy that he was left alone to go to the market together. Medusa asked the baby not to be angry with her and to go to bed. She also promised that she would return soon, and when he woke up, she would already be home. These words did not convince Percy at all, so he remained just as offended. Be that as it may, the door soon closed, leaving the child alone in the darkness. However, Percy was not going to obey so easily, and as soon as everyone left, he immediately rose to his feet. The little child looked around, having already planned to escape from the very beginning. Soon the baby climbed over the barriers, intending to get down to the floor. He managed to do this without any difficulty, and now he was thinking about what he should do next. Still, Percy decided that he should first get out of this room. The little child stood up and took a few steps forward. Even though he was destined to be a hero, he was still very clumsy. Suddenly, the baby stopped because he realized that he had been watched the whole time. Percy looked with displeasure and made some sounds. The author of this manhwa did not remember what this child wanted to say. Soon the baby tried to open the door, but since he was still a child, it was very difficult for him to do so. Nevertheless, the child resigned himself to the fact that he would not succeed, after which he again looked with displeasure at the author who had arranged this. Percy began making unrelated sounds again, which made the author realize that the baby was asking him for help. The author felt that in this situation he had no choice but to help the little protagonist. Thanks to this, the child managed to open the door. He was in no hurry to leave the room, but only stuck his head out from behind the door a little and looked at what was ahead. Still, the baby understood that the path was clear and he could leave the room without fear of meeting anyone here. Percy found himself in a large, spacious room that was now entirely at his disposal. The child was very impressed by this sight. The author of the Manhwa thought that it was not surprising, because now even the burden of fate did not weigh on Percy's life. Suddenly, the little boy jumped up and quickly ran to implement all his ideas while he had the opportunity. Of course, the first thing the little protagonist did was go to his favorite red apple, which was kept in one of the rooms of the house. Percy was very pleased because now he could eat as much apple as he wanted without fear of being refused. The author of the manhwa, of course, expected something like this, but he didn't think that the kid would actually do something like this. Percy didn't care about the judgment and simply enjoyed the opportunity. The little child, who had eaten his fill, needed some time to rest, so he lay down on the floor to his heart's content. Soon Percy wanted to do something again and looked around trying to find some entertainment. After this, the little child began to take steps with his short legs into the next room. For some reason, the baby was attracted to the nightstand that stood against the wall. Despite his young age, Percy managed to climb up, albeit with some difficulty. The child really wanted to look up close at the family photographs of the Gorgon sisters that hung on the wall. The kid looked at the photographs with surprise because he had never seen them from such a close distance before. A large framed photograph depicted the Gorgon sisters. There were also many smaller photographs cheerfully displayed on this wall. The author of the manhwa told the kid that Medusa had a large family, and he was not the only child raised by this evil spirit. The author continued to say that everything was not as it seemed to the world at first glance, but Percy did not listen to him, and, jumping to the floor, decided to go somewhere else. The author realized that this child could not calm down for a second, and therefore had already resigned himself to the fact that there would soon be chaos here. Percy was very happy about this because it meant that now he could do whatever he wanted. The next moment, a loud noise echoed throughout the house and the things of Sister Gorgon's spectators flew into the air. A small child with a contented grin on his face ran quickly around the room, completely unconcerned about the mess he had made. Besides this, he also ran out into the street because now the rooms of the house seemed very small to him. Percy ran faster and faster, as if he was trying to set a world record in sprinting. The little child was very happy that today he had the opportunity to do whatever he wanted without fear of moralizing. It was soon evening, which meant that it was time for our heroes to return home. A contented Medusa, holding shopping bags in her hands, happily called out to Percy and informed him that she was already home. The girl said that they bought a lot of tasty food and toys for the child. Very soon she forgot about everything, because she was shocked by the mess that was happening in the house. The main character did not understand why there was such a mess at home, and was very sorry that even her expensive flowers that she bought at the auction were scattered all over the room. Medusa did not understand what could have happened, and was already afraid that thieves had broken in, but Urieli, who was holding an apple in her hand, had a different opinion about this. The girl did not listen to her sister, and the first thing she did was go to the room where Percy's crib was to make sure that everything was okay with him. As it turned out, the little child was sleeping peacefully in his bed, as if he had absolutely nothing to do with what happened in the house. Medusa immediately took the child in her arms, being very glad that he was safe, because she still believed that thieves had broken into the house and caused the pogrom. At the same time, Urieli was thinking that it was obvious that Percy had gotten out of bed and made a mess in the house because she had irrefutable evidence of this. Steno seemed to know what her sister was thinking, and therefore suggested not to tell Medusa about it, since nothing irreparable had happened anyway. Meanwhile, the main character was still happy that everything was okay with Percy and therefore did not let him go. After this, Steno suggested that perhaps it was time for them to do some minor repairs at home so that the baby could move around safely. Urieli sighed heavily because she didn't really like changes, but still, she couldn't do anything about it. Looking at Medusa, who was hugging Percy, the girl said that she felt as if she had a real family. Steno replied with a smile that this was indeed the case. Urieli thought that this was too sentimental. After some time, it was time to start cleaning the house. This work fell to Steno and Urieli. The girls immediately lost their enthusiasm for this work because they did not understand how they were supposed to clean up such a mess. Another sunny day arrived that did not bode well for the island's inhabitants. However, our hero's home was very unsettled because Percy, for some reason, was furious. Shocked, Urieli asked her sister to calm him down. Despite the fact that this had been going on for an hour, the main character believed that she should simply ignore it. Urieli insisted that it was bothering her and she couldn't even practice fortune-telling, but Medusa just calmly drank coffee. The girl repeated again that her sister should just relax and not pay attention to Percy's hysteria. Then the main character mysteriously explained that Urieli's problem was in her thinking. At that moment, the girl looked extremely relaxed and calm. Urieli was amazed by her sister and did not understand how she could remain so calm despite what was happening. Still, the girl mentally assumed that Medusa was able to catch Zen and therefore did not pay attention to anything. After this, the main character explained that Percy was being naughty because he had nothing to do. The child got bored with everything too quickly. Steno agreed with this and added that this baby was too smart and absorbed information very quickly. That is why the new books and toys that were bought recently quickly bored the little main character. Now the child had only to suffer endlessly from boredom until something interested him again. Next, Medusa said that no matter what she did with the child, he was always upset and bored. The girl thought that being smart was good, but it was like a curse. After this, the main character thought about how she could help the baby, but nothing came to her mind. Then Steno suggested that the child was cramped in this small house and suggested going for a walk. Percy's eyes immediately lit up with this idea as soon as he heard these words. Medusa replied that she would be happy to walk with him on the street, but for now it was impossible to do so, since she had ordered an amulet that would allow her to avoid death from Grey, but it would only be delivered tomorrow. Then Steno suggested playing a game. Medusa became interested in the idea and asked what kind of game they were talking about. It turned out that the girl was talking about poker. Soon our heroes were already sitting at a round table and looking at their cards. Everyone was completely focused, and even Percy held the cards as if he knew the game well. Medusa asked if the child understood the rules of this game because she did not explain them to him. Urieli replied that judging by the baby's appearance, he was doing great, so she suggested they start playing. After this, our heroes began to play. Everyone gradually collected the required number of cards. No one had any difficulty with this. Several hours had passed since the game began, but the little child was still fully focused on his cards and was determined to continue. At the same time, Medusa was already exhausted and suggested stopping for today. Urieli thought that they needed several versions of such games. The main character didn't know what to offer because she knew little about games. Then Urieli said that she knew another game and could teach the others. Medusa was surprised by this because she did not understand how it could happen that her shy, introverted sister knew a game that had to be played together with others. Urieli asked everyone to wait for her because she needed to bring something. Steno refused to play because she still needed to prepare dinner. The girl thought that playing with 3 people was not so fun, but they had no other choice. Soon she brought some kind of deck of cards. Urieli became a professional shuffler of the cards and says it was Kwatu, a type of deck of playing cards also known as Hanafuda. Percy was interested in what would happen next, but Medusa was clearly not thrilled with this game. The main character was very unhappy that her sister taught the child such games, but Urieli was sure that Percy was not at all against it. Medusa responded to this by saying that he was still a child and therefore did not understand anything. Then she asked her sister to suggest something else, for example, Uno or Monopoly. Urieli replied that her sister had offended her if she thought that Kvatu was out of place here. The girl also said that the main character's problem was only in her thinking. Medusa hoped that everything would be fine. Urieli replied that the child was definitely interested in this game, but she would not be able to teach him much. The main character trusted her sister and also asked her to look after Percy because she was very tired and wanted to sleep. The girl went into another room but could not stop worrying because she believed that Urieli was too stupid to raise a child. Although she herself asked the girl to look after the baby so that she could sleep, perhaps she should have stayed and watched them. These thoughts, unnoticed by Medusa herself, plunged her into a deep sleep, so it was too late to worry about anything. After some time, the girl suddenly woke up with the thought that she had fallen asleep while thinking about this. The main character immediately got out of bed to check what Percy and Urieli were doing. Medusa entered the room and was dumbfounded in surprise because she never expected to see something like this. Urieli, realizing that her sister had already woken up, told her that the child was a real genius because he learned so quickly. At this time, Percy shuffled the cards like a real professional. The main character still stood silently in place and looked at her sister. Although it was not visible, she was very unhappy with what was happening. The dissatisfied girl turned Urieli into stone, after which she turned to Percy and said that he should not have applied in life everything that he learned from his aunt. At this, the little child looked at the main character as if he didn't agree with her. Suddenly, Percy, with an unperturbed expression, uttered the bad word that he heard from Aunt Urieli. The girl instantly became very angry with her sister. After this, Steno took the child in her arms and invited him to go and eat while Medusa and Urieli were busy. Percy said those words again, not understanding why they couldn't be said. Steno heard it. She assumed that it was Urieli who taught him something strange. The girl then explained to the child that studying was useful, but he shouldn't have said such things. So that the baby could understand everything better, Steno looked at him with her usual gaze, which as always seemed very stern and rude. Then the girl, without changing her facial expression, asked if the child had understood everything she had said. Percy didn't respond to this, but it was clear that he understood everything and would not say such bad words again. After this, Steno also told the child that the amulet for Medusa had already been delivered, and therefore tomorrow Percy would be able to go out with her. The kid was very happy about this. Then the girl turned to her sisters and suggested that they all go and eat together. However, no one reacted to this proposal in any way, because Urieli was turned into stone for her misdeed. Steno and Percy watched what was happening with surprise, simultaneously assuming that today they would have dinner only the two of them. Still dissatisfied, Medusa asked them to wait a little while she finished and joined them. On this day, Medusa was very happy because she finally received an amulet from Gray, which was supposed to compensate for some of the problems created by Percy. The girl was sure that now she would be able to lead a normal everyday life. Then she asked if this amulet was right for her. After thinking for a bit, Urieli replied that it looked like mosquito repellent, but the main character was not asking about that, but about its properties. Then the girl confirmed that it was a good amulet because some kind of magical illusion was hidden in it. Medusa was very happy because now she could walk with Percy. To this, Urieli asked where the girl wanted to go, because she didn't even know anyone in her own area. But Medusa already had her own plans. The next moment, the main character announced that she was going to drink coffee at her favorite establishment, which was located on the fabulous island of Hesperis. This island was untouched by people and was the land of the fairy dragon and monsters. In this place, legends came to life that no man dared to touch. It was on the shore of this island that there was a cafe with a view of the ocean, which was called Scylla. It was here that the main character was in such a hurry. Medusa was so happy that she finally came here, because this was the place where her soul lived, and she had long wanted to come here again. Finally, the girl opened the doors and went inside. This was accompanied by the ringing of a bell, which notified the owner of the establishment about the arrival of a guest. The hostess named Scylla, who was a water nymph, greeted her guests and only then realized that it was Medusa, which surprised her greatly. The main character quickly asked the girl to do what she usually did. Scylla was still surprised and asked if her friend was still alive. Then she saw Percy and assumed that this was the same human child who had a very dangerous fate, but it was none of her business, so she did not intervene. After this, Scylla asked what should be done for the child. Medusa replied that he was still small, so he just needed to be given milk. Suddenly, Percy himself made an order and asked for coffee. Scylla and Medusa were very surprised by this and looked at the child with incomprehension. In order to convince everyone of his intentions, the little child asked for coffee again. In order to be understood even better and not refused, the little boy loudly demanded for the third time that they make him coffee. Medusa immediately began to say that children were not allowed to drink coffee and therefore offered Percy milk or juice, but the child continued to insist on his own. Soon the baby started to have a hysterical fit because he couldn't get what he wanted. At that moment, Medusa realized that she wouldn't be able to drink coffee in peace. The girl also felt very uncomfortable with the baby's behavior and therefore asked him to behave quietly so as not to disturb other visitors. Meanwhile, the loud cry of a small child echoed throughout the establishment, attracting the attention of unusual visitors. Medusa, feeling their gaze on her, began to feel very awkward and therefore quickly shoved a candy into Percy's mouth to calm him down. After this, the main character asked everyone present for forgiveness and promised that she would just take a cup of coffee and immediately leave. Suddenly, someone approached the girl. This scared her a lot because she had already begun to fear that problems would begin. Still, Medusa turned around with confusion and saw that one of the visitors was addressing her. The girl with the unusual ears suggested that the main character was worried about them, which was not worth doing, because all children cried until they grew up. Medusa was so shocked that she lost the power of speech and looked at the other visitors to make sure that she and Percy really weren't bothering anyone. All the visitors assured the girl that everything was fine, and therefore she could make herself comfortable and not rush to make a choice. Medusa was very touched by this and could not believe what was happening, and Percy just kept saying that he wanted to get coffee. After this, Scylla turned to the main character and asked again what they would order, assuming that the baby was not interested in anything except coffee. Medusa said that Percy was very willful and stubborn, so he needed to be brought a drink similar to coffee but that children could drink. Scylla thought about it because in her Cafe Presto there were no such varieties of coffee. Then the girl suggested that she could mix the coffee with something so that only the smell remained, but it was difficult. Medusa was annoyed because she understood that she had started having problems because Percy kept asking for coffee and nothing else. After thinking a little more, Scylla said that she had one idea, so Medusa could pass by and sit down while she did everything and brought it. The main character was surprised because she didn't know what she should expect from her friend. Still, she hoped that her idea would work. After some time, Medusa and Percy were sitting on the open balcony, admiring the calm waters of the sea while waiting for their drinks. Scylla had already prepared everything and was carrying the order to a regular customer and his ward. The girl brought a large glass of drink for Medusa and a small one for Percy. The main character was surprised to see 2 glasses of seemingly ordinary coffee and asked Scylla what was the difference between them. The girl said that she made regular barley tea for Percy because when roasted correctly it tasted like coffee. This drink could be drunk by children. Medusa was surprised by this idea, but was worried whether the child would like this drink. Percy still dared to try this drink. The main character was very happy about this and said that Scylla was a genius and the best graduate of the School of Magic and Wizardry. However, it soon became clear that the child did not like this drink at all, so he spat it out, but no one noticed. At this time, Scylla was telling her friend that she was working on a new type of coffee and suggested that Medusa try it. The girl, of course, agreed with great joy. Then the main character warned Percy that she would be away for a short while and therefore asked him to behave quietly. The little child, with a smile on his face, waved his hand after Medusa, who praised him for his obedience. Immediately after this, a strong wind blew from the sea, which ruffled Percy's hair and attracted his attention. The child silently looked at the sea. From somewhere there, he had just recently arrived on this island. However, he was not sad at all because he liked living here with Medusa and her sisters. Percy didn't notice how at that moment someone was watching him closely and smiling slightly. At this time, Medusa was with her friend and watching the cooking process, was eagerly awaiting the moment of tasting. Someone's gold earring sparkled brightly, reflecting the rays of the sun that fell on it. Suddenly, an unfamiliar voice addressed the small child. Percy immediately turned to the side, trying to understand who it belonged to. The kid saw a mysterious woman who was sitting at the next table not far from him. Fate paid the hero a visit. The baby looked at the stranger with his eyes wide open in surprise and did not understand what he should expect from her. The girl turned to Percy again with a smile on her face and asked if they could talk. She also said that the child had a very interesting fate, but Percy was only concerned about who this stranger was. Meanwhile, Medusa had no idea what was going on, because she was tasting Scylla's new coffee and admiringly saying that it was the best drink. Fate itself extended its hand to the little child in order to tell him what awaited him ahead. Percy was surprised and did not understand what the stranger wanted to do, so he was careful. However, the child refused such a greeting and quickly moved to the side so that the girl's hand would not touch him. The stranger immediately realized that the baby was more careful than she thought, because usually people stayed in place. However, she admitted that it was her fault because she did not introduce herself to the child properly. The girl said that her name was Lachesis. She was one of the 3 sisters of the goddesses of fate and was the one who measured the thread. Percy was very surprised by this and did not notice that Medusa was already returning back. Suddenly, the main character grabbed the child in order to not allow Lachesis to have any further contact with him. The girl was surprised to see Medusa here as well, and immediately felt something that concerned her destiny. The main character asked with displeasure what the goddess of fate was doing in the land of 1,000 things, and suggested that she was here to talk to other people's children. Lachesis didn't answer this, but just thought about it, trying to remember the girl's name. She soon assumed that her name was Bekdusen. The main character immediately denied this and was unhappy that her name was being called incorrectly. Then Lachesis asked not to prompt her, after which she named several more names, but they all turned out to be wrong. The girl guessed that her interlocutor's name was Medusa and asked for forgiveness for not giving the correct answer right away. Then she told that she heard that the girl did not like the goddesses of fate. To this, the main character rudely asked the girl to leave here. Lachesis was a little offended. She was not going to leave because they made great coffee here, and besides, there was such a funny little boy here. In addition, the girl was amazed by the fact that Medusa was the guardian of this child. Medusa herself was not delighted that this conversation was still ongoing. Then Lachesis suggested just chatting a little and then going our separate ways. She also warned that if the main character were to cause a scandal, it would harm Scylla more than her. After this, Lachesis suggested that perhaps this conversation would be interesting for the girl. Medusa doubted this very much and asked the girl not to cross the line. Suddenly, Lachesis promised that she would buy the main character coffee. The girl could not resist this and was ready to endure this unpleasant conversation for her. Soon the coffee was ready, and Lachesis, holding the child in her arms, asked what his name was. Medusa reluctantly answered that his name was Percy. Lachesis thought it was a good name for this baby, and it also went well with his real name. Medusa was surprised to hear this. Then the goddess of fate explained that she knew the real name of this child. After that, she asked the main character if she wasn't interested in finding out who this baby really was and what his name was. Also, Lachesis, trying to intrigue the girl, said that she had something to tell her about this child. The main character replied that she was not interested because she knew that Percy was Percy, and that was enough for her. To this, Lachesis only smiled and thought about something, because she probably knew much more than Medusa knew. Percy also behaved quietly and silently looked into the distance as if this conversation was also unpleasant for him. Suddenly, Medusa said that since Lachesis was the goddess of fate, she could predict her future. The girl immediately began to deny it and say that she could not do this because she was a goddess and not a fortune teller. She only knew the direction of major turning points or important events. Medusa was surprised to hear this and immediately asked the girl what awaited her in the near future. Lachesis decided to answer this question. But to do this, she first had to see the events of the future, for which she closed her eyes. The main character thought that it looked burdensome. After some time, everything ended and the goddess of fate was ready to give her answer, but she clearly did not want to do it. Still, she said that on the closest threads of Medusa's fate, it was indicated that she could die. This did not surprise the girl at all, because she already knew this. Lachesis continued to say that the reason for this was this child, and believed that since the threads of fate spoke about it, then it would be so. All this was not news to Medusa, but it could not help but upset her, which is why the girl plunged into her thoughts. She soon asked if the goddess of fate was sure that Percy was really involved in her death. The girl continued to say that she had heard that it was Sister Lachesis who wove such threads of fate that even the supreme gods of Olympus could not resist. The main character was interested in whether this meant that this goddess had decided her fate long before Percy even appeared in her life. It was difficult for Lachesis to explain all this because Medusa had flooded it, because the girl had not seen anything new for her. Still, the goddess of fate said that it was not she who cut the thread. The girl continued to say that she only looked at the path of life itself, and death was the work of her youngest sister, whose name was Atropos. It was she who determined the death of all living things. Medusa, of course, did not remember this name, but Lachesis said that her sister was a good girl, but she was very demanding about her work. Atropos always said that her work was as important as birth, but when people heard her story, they tried to interfere with what she did. The goddess of fate hated this so much that she did not talk about work even with her own sister. Medusa, hearing this, thought that it was similar to her sister Urieli. After that, Lachesis asked if the main character wanted to look at the family portrait of her sisters. Medusa refused, after which she thanked for the coffee and was going to go because she had already heard enough useless information. Unexpectedly, Lachesis stopped the main character because she needed to say something to the girl for the last time. The next moment, the goddess of fate declared that Medusa was an integral part of Percy's life, and in the love of the universe they were obliged to meet. The girl was impressed by these words, but she tried not to show it, after which she said goodbye to Lachesis. Soon our heroes left the cafe, but before that, a small child received a small package from somewhere. Medusa was surprised to see him and assumed that Lachesis had given him to the baby. Percy himself answered that it was a gift from his aunt. The main character hoped that there was nothing dangerous for the child inside. Suddenly the girls remembered the words of the goddess of fate, that she was destined to meet this child. Medusa still couldn't believe that this little child was destined to kill her. Now Percy looked at the girl as if she were his own mother. Suddenly the child stretched out his hand intending to do something. Medusa watched this carefully. Without taking his eyes off the main character, Percy silently grabbed her dress as if he wanted to always be with her, and did not want to let her go anywhere. Because of this, Medusa immediately forgot about her worries and could only look into Percy's big shining eyes. After that, the girl smiled and asked if the child had fun today and if he wanted to come here again. From the wide smile on Percy's face, it was clear that he had had a great day today and wanted to do it again. However, the walk was over for today and our heroes began to return home. Lachesis watched this from the balcony, drinking another cup of coffee and mentally wishing a happy childhood to the hero Perseus. It was especially nice to spend this warm sunny day in the garden among the large flowers that exuded a pleasant aroma. It was especially pleasant to drink a cup of tea while in this garden, but today it was followed by a serious conversation. Medusa told everything that happened to her in the cafe and felt that she had no choice but to simply live in constant anxiety. Steno agreed with this, but warned that the girl had made this choice herself, so it would be even more offensive to her later. The main character replied that she decided not to think about such trifles, but she was worried all the time. After that, she took a big sip of tea. Steno was not at all happy that her sister was being haunted by such a fate, but she could not do anything about it and therefore regretted it. Unexpectedly, the main character stated that she was worried that Percy could kill her at any moment. However, this did not stop the girl from spending time with this little child and admiring how cute he was. The girl joked that the only danger to her life now was that Percy's appearance could cause her heart to jump out. Medusa loved this child very much, despite all the prophecies and their inevitability, so she made full use of the time allotted to her. One day, Steno suggested that her sister go to the Golden Garden so that she could change the scenery and relax. Medusa was not enthusiastic about this idea because this was the very garden that was tended by those fine sisters. Steno clarified that they were the mistresses of Hesperida. After that, she said that the seasons would soon change and that the Hesperid ladies were very busy because they were decorating the Golden Garden. In order to finally convince her sister, the girl suggested that for Percy, this would certainly be an unforgettable experience. Medusa was unhappy with her sister's manipulation of the child and his well-being, but still agreed to accept the idea. Soon the main character and Percy found themselves in a golden garden. Looking around, Medusa admitted that the Hesperid sisters did a good job with their duties. An unexpected child approached the main character of the lady to draw her attention to the flowers. Medusa realized that the baby liked these flowers and decided to find their names in the book. While Percy admired the bright flowers with admiration and inhaled their aroma, the girl looked for the necessary information. Soon, the main character's expression changed because she found the right page and read that these flowers were called daffodils. According to legend, these flowers appeared when the gods cursed man. This information created a gloomy atmosphere. Percy immediately imagined a picture of a goddess turning a young guy into a flower for admiring his reflection in the water. This frightened the child, so he began to move away from these flowers. Seeing that the baby was upset, Medusa suggested looking for something else here, because she believed that at least one flower should be less dangerous and more adequate. Soon the girl came across an information hyacinth. According to the myth, it was a boy who served the god Apollo, but during the competition, he died and turned into a flower. Next, Medusa read about the flower Anatona. It was named after a boy who served the goddess Aphrodite and who died while hunting. The main character was very surprised by all this and began to wonder if all the flowers were people at first and listened to the gods and then died. Still, the girl thought that this book did not help them at all, and therefore she suggested that the child look for something interesting himself. Percy agreed with this. Then Medusa began to wonder if there were any plants without a dramatic backstory, but she was having trouble doing so. At this time, the little child looked around and still found something that could interest him. Soon, Medusa also looked to the side and noticed something unusual for these places. It turned out that the attention of our heroes was drawn to a large bag of unusual fruits that they had never seen before. Medusa and Percy quickly approached the bear and began to carefully examine its contents in order to understand what it was. Suddenly, for no apparent reason, there was a loud explosion that greatly frightened the girl and the small child. The main character had dropped out of school a long time ago, so she didn't understand what kind of bag it was. Outwardly, they resembled an ordinary bag of tubers, but it seemed that there was some kind of magic seal on it. Suddenly fascinated by such an unusual object, Percy began to move closer and closer to it despite the danger. Medusa noticed this and asked the child not to touch it, but it was too late. The baby's hand touched the bag. The next moment, a loud explosion thundered again, and something flew out of the bag itself at great speed. Medusa understood that something happened, but so quickly that she did not have time to see anything. The girl began to make her own guesses and did not notice that someone was already approaching them from behind. Suddenly, someone's voice turned to our heroes and rudely asked if they really intended to rob the goddess's garden. It turned out that it was one of the sisters of Hesperides. She was very surprised to see Medusa here with a human child. Then the girl asked if they had untied the bag of tubers. The main character immediately began to justify herself by saying that they had not done anything because Percy had only lightly touched it. The frightened little child began to worry that because of this, Hesperides' sister would now scold him. However, the girl explained that these were new plants that they planned to move to the garden. They looked like tubers but could fly through the sky. After that, she looked into the bag to check its contents. Percy and Medusa also looked inside with confusion. It turned out that there was only one plant left in the bag, which in principle really did look like a tuber, but Medusa thought that it looked like something strange. Suddenly, Hesperides' sister said that it would be nice if our heroes helped catch all the escaped tubers. The main character did not agree with this. Then the girl explained that the magic circle they had drawn around the bag kept out people and monsters, but for some reason the magic ignored Percy. Of course, the sister of Hesperides did not intend to place all the responsibility on Reberg, but warned that the goddess of the garden could be very angry about what happened. After a short consultation, our heroes set to work. Soon they discovered one of the escaped tubers that was fighting with a crow. A moment later he was caught thanks to Medusa's precise and sharp movements. Sister Hesperides praised the girl because she was already a 17-year-old tuber. She was also surprised that the Gorgons were so good at climbing trees. At the same time, the main character was not at all happy with what was happening, because initially they went to this garden to relax. Soon the bear was already filled to the brim with tubers, but this was not the end of the work. Sister Hesperides counted the plants and said that they had already caught almost all of them. She believed that they should have completed this work before the return of the elder sister Hesperides. Then the girl wanted to ask Medusa a question about why she wasn't particularly happy. Still, the girl asked if this child was really a human hero. The main character immediately calmed down because she was surprised that the girls somehow managed to figure this out. Sister Hesperis told what she thought about why the circle missed Percy and realized that this child received the protection of the gods and became a man who was destined to be a hero. The girl also suggested that in the future, Medusa would be a great danger. To this, the main character responded with displeasure that this should not have bothered the sister of Hesperida. After this, Medusa demanded that the girl change the subject of the conversation. Sister Hesperida agreed that it did not concern her and suggested that she return to work. The girl was already beginning to worry about the tubers that they had not yet caught, because one could say that this garden was a little dangerous. Hearing these words, the main character thought that she had a very bad feeling about all this. As the sister of Hesperides said, not all the tubers had been caught yet. One of them was now hunting flies. However, very soon the hunter himself became a victim when he came across an unusual plant with sharp teeth and excellent reflexes. Medusa asked if there were plants in this garden that caught and ate other moving plants. Sister Hesperida confirmed this and suggested that the escaped tubers were located there. The main character did not understand why it was necessary to grow such strange plants that did not even look like plants. The girl replied that it was the goddess's wish. She continued to tell that when the goddess got tired of her husband, she would come here and have fun to cheer herself up. Meanwhile, our hero still had a couple more tubers to catch. Sister Hesperides was determined, so she took a special instrument with her. Medusa was surprised to see it and asked what it was. The girl replied that it was a net for catching tubers. She also said that she had already drawn a magic circle, so they definitely wouldn't be able to get out. The main character took the instrument in her hands and confidently said that she stood guard and promised that none of these strange tubers would get out. Sister Hesperida said at the end with a smile on her face that she did not rush the girl because catching even one was already good. Medusa, getting closer and closer to the huge toothed plant, assumed that Hesperida decided to scare her and therefore sent her here. The girl also believed that none of the Hesperids had ever approached this plant, but this did not stop them from sending her here. Still, Medusa was glad that this plant was sleeping, because next to this monster, even flies were probably afraid to fly. Suddenly, Percy saw one of the escaped tubers and immediately informed the main character about it. The girl was very surprised that he climbed right onto the carnivorous plants. This tuber was too high, but Medusa thought that she could climb up to it along the branches, but to do this, Percy had to get off her. Suddenly, the little child began to act up and say that he didn't want to get down. The main character did not understand what the reason was for this and warned the baby that he could get hurt. Then Percy tried to explain the reason why he wanted to stay, but being a small child, he could only utter the word flower. The main character looked at the baby with incomprehension, who seemed to be already upset that he could not get what he wanted. However, Percy was not going to give up and looking the girl straight in the eyes again said, "Big flower." After that, The jellyfish thought that the children were so cute, and that's why she couldn't go anywhere when the child wanted to look at the big flower. It was a hopeless situation. Still, the girl had no choice but to leave everything as it was, and soon she and Percy were making their way through the dense thickets of thorny bushes. The jellyfish asked the child to hold on to her tighter and assured him that there was nothing difficult in this work, because they only needed to quietly pick up the tuber with a net. Then the girl immediately began to do her job, but it turned out to be not as easy as expected. After some time and several wasted attempts, the main character still managed to catch the escaped tuber, which she was very happy about. Immediately after this, to Medusa's surprise, she and Percy began to quickly lean to the side for some reason. The next moment, the girl with the child in her arms began to fall down, but she was still happy that they managed to catch the tuber. Suddenly, for some reason, the main character stopped falling, which surprised him greatly, because she was still far from the ground. It turned out that the girl's savior was a blood-bearing plant with whole teeth, but it did not do it out of good intentions. Medusa was cheerfully upside down and was very scared, but Percy was quite the opposite. He admired the sight of the large flower despite the danger it carried. The main character began to loudly demand that the flower let them go, because they would simply take what they needed and leave here. However, the plants did not obey and began to shake our heroes violently. The little child was delighted with this because it was like an attraction, but Medusa was not at all happy about what was happening. The girl regretfully recalled that they came to this garden to change the scenery a little, so she did not understand why these misfortunes happened to her even here. The main character looked at the child and began to wonder if all this was really happening to her. Medusa continued to look at the child and ask herself if he really was bringing her bad luck. At the same time, Percy was very happy about what was happening, because he was just a kid who did not understand how dangerous all this was. Medusa looked at the happy child with great surprise and assumed that right now she would die. The probability of this was very high, because the flower monster had already opened its mouth filled with sharp teeth and was bringing its victims to it. However, it soon became clear that the main character was not going to give up so easily, despite the prophecy. The enraged girl stood up and attacked the predatory plants with all her might, shouting along the way that the monster's plans were not destined to come true. Medusa also said that she was an adult and therefore blaming the child for everything was very stupid. Instead, she needed to quickly find a solution. The girl was sure that there had to be some way to get out of here with Percy. In order to find this way, the main character first decided to calm down and look around to study her opponent. After that, she pushed herself away from the monster and jumped back in order to somehow protect herself and the child. At that moment, she saw that inside the mouth of the predatory plant was its huge eye, which was looking straight at the girl. Medusa was very surprised to see this, because she did not expect this from the plants that grew in the goddess's garden. However, the girl was able to quickly pull herself together and come up with an excellent plan that instantly gave her determination. Then the main character turned to Percy and suggested that he play hide and seek. The child had to close his eyes and not open them until they hid from this big flower. Meanwhile, the monster was already about to make its next attack, so the little child immediately listened to the girl and closed his eyes. The predatory plant was closely watching its victims, but suddenly its only eye was blinded by a bright light. It turned out that the reason for this was Medusa, who, being full of rage, used her main weapon. At that very moment, the monster stopped, sleepy and scared. Compete with someone like that. Soon, the predatory plants turned into stone, giving our heroes the opportunity to return to Earth unharmed. Immediately after this, Hesperides' sister returned to our heroes and asked how their hunt for tubers went. I hope that everything was great. The girl was very surprised when she saw a petrified predatory plant and an exhausted Medusa lying on the ground. Sister Hesperida could not believe that our heroes had to fight with that huge plant. Still, she praised them and said that now they could go home. The girl also suggested that this situation showed that fortune had indeed turned its back on the main character, but she should not be sad about it. Medusa replied that thanks to what had happened, everything was now in place in her head. The girl immediately asked if she had missed something, since she hadn't noticed the main character worrying about anything. Medusa was in no hurry to explain anything, because she herself still needed time to come to her senses and think everything over. However, the next moment the girl's mood noticeably improved, and she confidently stated that no matter what, she wanted to make Percy happy. Sister Hesperida seemed very surprised by these words, which made her momentarily dumbfounded, but soon she asked what the main character was talking about. Medusa explained with displeasure that she simply wanted to say something touching, and if Hesperides' sister was not impressed by it, Then she advised her to go to hell. Soon after a walk in the garden, the main character fell ill due to overwork. He lay by the bed and asked his sister not to pretend to be an angel. Urieli did not understand what could have happened for the girl to suddenly fall ill. Medusa said that for the first time in a long time she turned something gigantic into stone. Urieli was already afraid that her sister was in conflict with someone again, but the girl denied this and explained that she did it for the purpose of self-defense. Hearing this, the girl asked her sister to rest all the time. She had been trying very hard for Percy lately and had not thought about herself at all. After this, the main character asked if her sister could look after the child while she was recovering. Urieli immediately responded with a categorical refusal. It was as if she was afraid to have any contact with the baby. Medusa also asked what the reason for this was. The girl explained that she in no way hated Percy, but was very afraid of him because she felt an insane heroic power in him. The main character did not understand this. Urieli continued to say that they were just monsters and Percy was a man with the destiny of a hero, so she did not want to be his first achievement. Medusa believed that the girl was worried about nonsense. Suddenly, the menacing voice of Steno was heard in the room, saying that she would take the child into her care. Medusa and Urieli immediately fell silent, shocked by the sudden appearance of their sister. Steno continued to say that she had already made a schedule and would be able to show the child many picturesque things. Hearing this, the main character thought that she had nothing to worry about. Then the girl began to assure her sister that Percy was calm and already behaved like an adult. After some time, Steno took the surprised child in her arms and left the house with him. Percy immediately asked where Medusa was. The girl said that she felt unwell today, which is why the child was upset. Steno asked the child not to worry, because her sister was bound to feel better after the rest. The girl also told the child that today they would spend the day like ordinary monsters. The first item on Steno's list concerned the preparation of firewood. The girl explained to the child that they were necessary to light a fire. Percy immediately remembered the new word, and Steno continued to say that it was too hot during the day to do this work, so everything had to be done before noon. The girl also said that their other sisters might also need firewood. The child, hearing this, was very surprised that there was another family of Gorgons. Steno saw this reaction and explained that it was normal for monsters to have one common ancestor, and of course they also had Gorgon brothers and sisters. It was difficult for little Percy to understand all this, which the girl immediately saw. Then she tried to explain it differently, and said that it could be compared to different idol groups from the same agency. Now Percy understood everything. After some time, having prepared the required amount of firewood, Steno said that they would send it to Gray. The girl didn't stay long because it was time for them to move on. The next item on her list of jobs was less active. Percy was surprised that she had some other work planned for today. Then Steno said that they had the whole day planned out today. Very soon, our heroes came to another place. The girl was completely concentrated and for some reason was holding a rope in her hands. It turned out that she was weaving threads. Along the way, the girl said that Percy probably saw something like this for the first time, but the daily routine was very important so that there would be no inconvenience. Then Una said that if the baby wanted, he could walk around and look around, but she warned the child to be careful since this warehouse was already old. Suddenly, Percy and Steno heard a strange sound that immediately attracted their attention. It turned out that it was produced by a small beetle that was crawling around the room. Steno clearly didn't like this, so in the blink of an eye she rushed at him and knocked him down with a powerful blow of her hand. After this, the girl again warned the baby to be careful because there were a lot of such bugs here. Percy was very impressed and was no longer going to go anywhere. Soon the girl turned to the child again and said that it was time for them to start doing other work. Percy was very surprised by this because he didn't realize that they still had so much to do today. After this, our heroes headed to the field near the sea. Steno, sparing no effort, began to cultivate the land while Percy watched everything sitting behind her. The girl said that she had received permission from Hesperida to plant vegetables on this land and wanted to plant different plants here so that they could all eat the fruits of their own production. Suddenly, the work in the open air was interrupted because our heroes heard someone screaming nearby. It turned out that the reason for this was the unexpected appearance of a bloodthirsty monster who was up to something bad. However, one powerful attack from Steno instantly destroyed all of the monster's plans. The girl told the child that sometimes she also fought with monsters that came out of the water. Steno thought that it was a lot of fun. Frightened by the appearance of the monster, the sisters of Hesperides thanked the girl for her help, but mistakenly called her Urieli. The girls then presented Steno with a large bag of various vegetables and fruits as a token of their gratitude. After this, Steno told the child that they had already done almost everything that was planned for today, so they could already return home and cook dinner. The girl also thought that Percy had seen a lot of new and unusual things today, and that was why he looked happy. In fact, the child was only happy that they were returning home. Very soon the sun began to set behind the horizon, and the birds hurried to find a place to spend the night. Medusa was very happy to see Percy because she had missed him all this time. Then she asked if the child enjoyed the walk and if he had bothered Steno. The girl said that the baby behaved like a real adult. The main character was glad to hear this and praised Percy. After this, Steno asked her sister how she felt. Medusa happily replied that she felt much better because Urieli had nursed her all day. When Steno left to prepare dinner, the main character turned to Percy to ask him about how he spent the day. The girl asked what the child did today and whether he enjoyed spending time with Steno. Percy immediately began to remember everything that happened to him during the day, and it seemed to frighten him a little. Still, the child answered that he really liked today. Medusa was delighted because the baby learned a new word. Then she asked what Percy liked the most, but he didn't have time to answer because a beetle appeared out of nowhere in the room, which the main character didn't like at all. Percy didn't wait for Medusa to bring him some insect repellent because today he learned how to act in such situations. The next moment, the child, with an unperturbed look, rushed at the beetle and got rid of the problem with a powerful blow. The loud sound immediately echoed throughout the house. Medusa was very surprised by what she saw and did not understand where Percy got such strength and such skills from. Soon, Steno entered the room and asked what the noise was and why the floor was broken. The main character didn't respond to this because she was still in shock from what had happened. There was absolute silence in the room. Still, the agitated girl began to slowly turn towards her sister. A shocked Medusa asked with a trembling voice what Steno had taught the child while he was with her. At this time, Percy, being very pleased with himself, looked at his aunt, and his appearance showed that he had learned her lessons well. This surprised Steno herself, and she was dumbfounded on the spot because she understood what had happened. Still, the girl replied that today she taught the child how to grow vegetables. Of course, Medusa didn't believe it. At that moment, Urieli woke up from a long sleep and, seeing her sisters, asked what had happened and why there was such an oppressive atmosphere here. After what happened to the child, Medusa gathered her sisters and declared that it was time for them all to take some action. The girl began to explain that Percy was a very smart child who did the same things as adults and also quickly learned to speak. All this eventually resulted in destruction. Urieli thought that it was natural because Percy was a human child who was destined to become a hero, so it was obvious that he would bring destruction to the monsters. Steno, having listened to her sisters, believed that Medusa was right in this situation. The girl was surprised that her sisters supported her. After that, she continued to say that they were the only adults from whom Percy learned anything, so he had to be careful and watch his words and actions. The main character felt uncomfortable and found it quite difficult to follow these new rules, but she decided to try to do everything right. The girl turned to Percy with a smile and, carefully choosing her words, suggested that he read a story about the love of two people and not about monsters and battles. The little child was very surprised by such a sudden change in the main character's behavior and did not understand what was happening to her at all. Medusa tried to remain in the same image for the sake of the baby but felt very uncomfortable, which is why her emotions looked fake. After this, the main character said that from that moment on, all words and actions that were harmful to the child were prohibited, and it was also not worth using foul language. Urieli found that following these rules was much harder than just talking about them. She also asked if Medusa was not going to do anything other than limit their words and actions. At this point, the main character prepared to listen to Urieli's proposal because she knew that she would not offer a better option. Suddenly, Steno silently got up from the table and headed for the exit. Medusa didn't say anything and asked where the girl was going to go. Steno stopped abruptly and looked at her younger sisters with a hint of sadness in her eyes. She went on to say that she didn't think she could be a good example for Percy, so it was better for her to go work outside. These words shocked Medusa and Urieli. They were struck by lightning as if by such an unexpected statement. Some time passed. The main character, remembering this situation, thought that it was not at all like Steno, so they should have a normal talk about it. The girl also thought with displeasure that Urieli did not listen to her at all when she spoke about the new rules, so Medusa decided that at least she had to try. After all the preparations were completed, the main character went to the table where Percy was already sitting. Having made a kind expression on her face, the girl said in a calm voice that it was time for them to have tea together. Percy was shocked because he was not used to seeing Medusa like this and did not understand at all what the reason for these changes was. Then the main character placed the cups on the table without saying anything, but she carefully watched her words. The girl was nervous but tried not to show it and stubbornly followed her rules when pouring tea. At the same time, Medusa wondered what was usually done at a tea party. At this time, Percy also sat silently in place and looked at the main character, feeling awkward about what was happening. The girl then assumed that she would come to an understanding during the process, and therefore offered the child to drink tea before it cooled down. Medusa took a small sip of the hot drink, not yet knowing what awaited her ahead. The next moment, the girl felt a different taste of tea than she expected, and she immediately spat it out. After this, the main character began to swear loudly because she already understood what was going on. Percy was shocked because he didn't know what was happening to the girl. For a while, Medusa sat silently with her head bowed and tried to come to her senses. Trying to follow her own rules, the girl tried to make a normal expression on her face while saying that the tea was very tasty. The author of this manhwa noted that Medusa was lying because it was all written on her face. Because of this comment, the girl got angry and asked him not to interfere. However, Medusa admitted that this tea tasted disgusting and she could not drink it. The girl did not understand what the reason was, because this tea was supposed to be good. The main character then suggested that she had misunderstood something and therefore should try the drink again. The miracle did not happen. The tea had a pleasant smell, but it was impossible to drink. Because of this, Medusa thought that black tea simply did not suit her. Percy decided to try this drink. It soon turned out that the child liked this tea. The main character was happy about this and suggested that he also try the sweets that were prepared for this tea party. Sitting on the terrace on a warm, sunny day, our heroes enjoyed delicious sweets and aromatic tea. Medusa thought the treats were good but somehow bland and dry, so she decided to add sugar. There was just a glass jar of sugar standing on the table, waiting to be used. The main character took a pinch of sugar and sprinkled it on a piece of pie as if she were performing some kind of magical ritual. After these manipulations, the food became much tastier, and therefore Medusa could fully enjoy it. Soon all the treats were eaten and the tea was drunk. Our heroes sighed heavily, because they had eaten very much. Medusa looked very pleased. She had a good time with Percy despite breaking her own rules. Still, the girl felt that she should go to her sisters and tell them that these new rules were being cancelled. However, the main character could not do this because this had never happened before. At this time, Percy looked at Medusa with a smile. The girl assumed that the child was tired and asked him for forgiveness for forcing him to do all this. Suddenly, Percy began to deny this, which greatly surprised the main character. The little child, with a smile on his face, continued to say that everything was delicious and he liked it. The main character was very touched by these words, which caused tears to well up in her eyes. The girl began to think that at first she considered Percy just a child who did not understand anything, but in fact he was very smart for his age. She further suggested that instead of forcing anyone, it would be much better for everyone to study together. That's why the joyful Medusa ran into the house and called her sister and said that she had changed her mind about the new rules, and it would be better to just learn new things little by little. Suddenly, the main character interrupted her speech because she saw something very unusual that amazed her. Urieli asked with annoyance and sadness in her voice if her sister's words were true. It turned out that all this time the girl wanted to follow the new rules and even created a new image and clothes for herself. She had just finished all the preparations, but it was no longer important. Still, Urieli came to terms with it, saying that she still had fun trying it all on. Medusa and Percy were still shocked and couldn't take their eyes off the girl. Now the main character felt very awkward because she forced her sister to make such changes for her sake. The girl with tears in her eyes began to ask for forgiveness. Urieli was unhappy because she was angry, and Medusa was upset. At this moment, Steno suddenly appeared, and was surprised that the main character still refused the idea of new rules. The girl considered this to be good news, after which she showed a box of educational materials for children that she had received from the Hesperides. Medusa was very happy because now it was possible to change the approach to teaching Percy. Still angry, Urieli asked her sister to stop constantly changing her mind. The main character was still determined to raise Percy properly, but her sisters did not understand how the girl wanted to do this. Medusa suggested teaching the child using children's educational materials. Urieli thought this was rather strange, since the girl was speaking adequately for the first time. Steno began by saying that the content that children were interested in was usually entertaining in nature, but this box probably contained books that were aimed at education. Then the girl suggested that the main character open this box and look at its contents. But Medusa refused, intending to consult with someone first. Steno and Urieli, the universes, did not understand with whom the main character was going to consult about the education of children. Soon Medusa was already talking to Scylla, who did not understand why they were asking her about this, but the main character considered her very smart. Scylla replied that she was pleased that Medusa trusted her so much, but it would have been better to go to the Hesperid sisters. This option did not suit the girl. Then Scylla remembered that among all her guests there were some who asked a similar question, and for such a case she had a whole catalog. The main character drank her coffee and eagerly awaited the return of the girl, who had gone somewhere. Soon she returned and laid out a large sheet of paper on the table. Scylla said that she was asked to advertise products that might interest the main character. Medusa looked at the list and was surprised at how many cool things there were. Then she suggested looking at everything in turn. Scylla began to suggest various things that would improve the child's reasoning and communication skills. Medusa agreed to everything with great enthusiasm. Suddenly the girl fell silent and thought about something, carefully studying the list. Soon she offered the main character to buy educational things that would improve children's independence skills. The girl agreed. Then Scylla suggested buying things to develop intelligence. Without a second thought, Medusa agreed to buy this too. The girl continued to offer the main character to buy things with which the child could learn to read people like a hidden book. The girl with shining eyes and a wide smile on her face agreed to buy it, and this too, without thinking about anything at all. Scylla was angry that her friend was making purchases without thinking, and said that she shouldn't have given in to advertising manipulations, but should have thought first and then bought. Soon the main character returned home and showed off all her purchases. Urieli was surprised by their quantity and asked if it was really necessary to use all of it. Medusa was sure that all this would be very useful for Percy, after which she suggested that the child first try what he himself chose. Urieli thought that all this was useless because the baby was already very smart, but Medusa was sure that this would leave the child with a pleasant memory from childhood. Soon Percy chose the thing he wanted to play with. The main character thought that it was an excellent choice because she knew that in the world of toys, this thing was very popular. While the child was playing with a new toy, Urieli asked her sister how much money she spent on all this. Medusa did not answer the question because she thought it was unimportant. The child was playing with a toy where he had to insert figures into a suitable hole. He coped quite quickly, and it seemed that it was easy for him. Suddenly, Percy stopped because, to his surprise, he found himself in a difficult situation. A small child held two figures in his hands and did not understand which one was a square and which was a rhombus. For Percy, this was a very difficult task that left him at a loss. He did not know what to do next. After some time, the child finally managed to do it and informed Medusa about it. The girl was very happy about this and already wanted to see the result. The little child proudly showed off the results of his work, believing that everything had been done in the best possible way. However, upon closer inspection, it was clear that almost all the figures were out of place. They seemed to have been pressed in, which could be considered as if the baby had not coped. Of course, Medusa and Urieli noticed this, which did not at all coincide with their expectations. Then Urieli asked Percy if he had always been so reckless. The child did not like these words, and Medusa asked her sister not to tell him anything. However, the main character was very surprised by the result and did not understand how this could happen, because she did not believe that Percy was not able to solve such a simple riddle. Then the girl timidly asked the child if it was difficult for him to play this game. Percy honestly confirmed this. Then Medusa suggested that this game was not really that easy. At that moment, Urieli was struck by lightning from the realization of what was happening. The girl suggested that perhaps this child was so strong that he simply did not need intelligence. Medusa believed that this could not be, but Urieli asked her sister to let her explain everything. According to the rules of this game, if a child could not insert a figure into the correct hole, he had no choice but to rack his brains and look for the correct answers. However, the sisters knew that Percy was different and that he had something that the other children did not have. Of course, Urieli spoke about Percy's incredible strength that he had had since birth. The next moment, the girl loudly declared that she was sure that Percy was one of those who did not need to think because he was very strong. That is why the tasks that required physical strength did not cause problems for the child. That is why this toy could not help Percy, because nothing was impossible for him if he had strength. Medusa understood perfectly well what her sister was talking about, but she could not believe it and did not know what to do in the current circumstances. The girl then said that they couldn't just buy books for the child. Urieli agreed with this, but it was worth accepting the fact that Percy had a hard time playing with such toys. After this, the girl suddenly fell silent, as if she was thinking about how to act in this situation. Suddenly, Urieli said that she had no need to think about it and that her sister should deal with it herself. Medusa was not happy with this and thought that her sister was simply abandoning her. Urieli denied this and recalled that when they went to school, her sister got better grades, so now she had a good opportunity to show her ingenuity. After this, the Gorgon sisters began to argue loudly and curse at each other. Percy watched all this carefully. Suddenly, the little child turned to Medusa and his aunt. The girls immediately calmed down and looked at Percy, trying to understand what he needed. It turned out that the baby was simply saying something out loud, while simultaneously pronouncing the name of the main character and her sister. After this, Percy said his name and then became upset and fell silent. Medusa and Urieli watched the child carefully, trying to understand what he wanted to convey to them. Urieli had no idea at all, so she asked her sister what Percy was talking about, but the girl herself did not know. Then the main character began to think about the fact that she had sisters, and they were like close friends to her. Urieli also thought about Percy's words, and it seemed that she had one idea. The girl turned to the child and asked if he really wanted to have a friend his own age. Hearing this, the little boy thought about the meaning of the word friend and for some reason became sad. For some reason, the child remembered only the sound of the sea and the shore where Medusa found him. However, the kid said that friend it was good. Unexpectedly, Urieli suggested making a friend for Percy. The main character thought that it was easy only in words, because she didn't even guess how many of Percy's peers lived on the island. According to surveys, the average age of the inhabitants of the island of Hesperis was 781 years old, but Urieli believed that these statistics were based only on rumors. Then the girl reminded her sister that she promised to do everything possible for the child. Hearing this, the main character exhaled heavily and thought about these words, after which she said that she was not yet used to the fact that her sister was sometimes right. Hesperis was an island that was originally intended as a garden for a goddess. She entrusted her wonderful garden to fairies and monsters who at first served for people. But as time went on, soon a bunch of evil spirits gathered on the island that harmed people. The main character read this information in some book, but it was not what she was looking for. Medusa turned page after page and carefully read the text, because she was looking for information about the island's population. Finally, she found what she was looking for. On one of the pages, it said that a 2-year-old child lived on the island. At that moment, Scylla approached the girl and brought her coffee, after which she asked what the main character was doing here. Medusa happily revealed that she was looking for a person Percy's age so that they could become friends. Scylla immediately realized that her friend was talking about that stubborn child with whom she had recently come to the cafe. Then she thought that it would be difficult to just meet someone Percy's age, after which she asked if Medusa had already found someone. The main character said that in the northwest there was a hill on which a newborn chick lived, but since the records were old, it could be assumed that he was a little older. However, Medusa assumed that it was stretching was almost the same age as Percy, which meant that they could become friends. Scylla decided to verify the veracity of this information and took the book and read what was written on its pages. After that, the girl asked if it wasn't too much. Medusa replied that maybe the chicks were a little rougher, but it was easy to talk to them. Scylla thought that it was not so important, because now the girl should pay attention to the date when this book was published. Scylla then went on to say that this book was published 422 years ago. After this, the girl stated that this meant that this child was 424 years old. Medusa was shocked to learn this information, and already imagined how ridiculous her dialogue with this chick would look. After this, the main character was very upset because she thought that there were no people Percy's age on the island, because it was important to remember that this was an unusual island. Still, the girl decided that nothing could be done about it, so she finished her coffee and returned home to Percy. Unexpectedly, Scylla asked her friend where her ward was now. Medusa said that he was playing in the yard. At first, she didn't want to leave him alone, but Percy was very smart and growing quickly, so she thought that everything would be fine. Very soon, the main character returned home and ran to meet the child with great joy. He was also very happy to see the girl. Medusa asked what the baby was doing there and whether he was bored alone. To Percy's surprise, he replied that everything was fine. After this, the child said with great joy that he had made a friend. Medusa was very surprised by such a statement because she did not understand who Percy could become friends with here, but she said that it was great. After that, the girl said that she needed to go get some flower pots, so she asked the child to stay there and not go outside the yard. Percy agreed with this and said that he would play together with Mary. It looked and sounded quite creepy. The main character was surprised again because she didn't understand who the child could be talking about. On the entire coast near their house, no one lived at all. Soon the girl stopped thinking about it because she started replanting flowers in order to free up the pots. While working, she suddenly heard a familiar voice, but it was quiet and therefore it was impossible to understand what he was saying. This again reminded Medusa that Percy was friends with someone, so she brought it up to think about it. The main character assumed that Percy had an imaginary friend because they lived in the wilderness and their house was in a secluded place, so there were no people there at all. Soon, the girl decided to watch what the little child was doing, and for this she quietly stuck her head out from around the corner of the house. Medusa saw Percy, who, as he was told, remained where he was and played in the yard. It was clear that the child was having a good time, but apart from that, it seemed as if he was talking to someone. The main character was shocked to see this, but she did not understand how this was possible. The alarmed girl ran up to the child and asked if they had guests. Percy pointed to the side, showing that Mary was there. It turned out that the baby, with a sincere smile on his face, was pointing towards the sea, which, as always, was calm and only made the sounds of the water. The main character was very worried about this, but outwardly she tried to remain calm so as not to frighten the child. After that, the girl quickly grabbed the child in her arms and, saying that it was getting cold outside, suggested that Percy return to the house and play inside. The little protagonist, not understanding anything, asked about Mary, to which the girl suggested that Percy play with her later. Suddenly the child said that Mary would follow them, which really scared the main character. The girl began to quickly run away, saying along the way that they were returning to the house, and Mary should not have followed them because her parents should have been worried about her. After some time, Medusa sat at the table and carefully thought over what had happened. Urieli approached her and asked what the girl was thinking about. Medusa asked if her sister knew if there was anyone near their house or if Steno had brought someone. Having heard a negative answer, the girl continued to say that in fact something rather strange had happened because Percy had seen something that no one else had seen. Just like in the manga, The Girl Who Sees It. Urieli immediately assumed that her sister had seen a man with a scythe who had come to kill her. Medusa assumed that the girl was talking about the Death Reaper. Urieli continued to say that since the child was supposed to be the cause of her sister's death, it was logical that she saw the Death Reaper. After this, the main character turned to Percy and asked if they could talk about Mary. It seemed that the child was not at all against it. Medusa, hiding her alarm, began to ask where Mary lived and how Percy met her. In order to answer these questions, the little child began to strain his memory in order to tell everything, but for a long time he could not remember anything about meeting Mary. Still, Percy tried to tell what he remembered, but all of this was more like unrelated sounds, the meaning of which Medusa could not understand. All that the main character assumed was that the child was talking about evil that was more or less common. After this, the girl turned to Percy again and saw that he was busy with something and asked what he was doing. Medusa was very nervous and her whole body was consumed by an anxious feeling as if danger was approaching. Hearing the question, the child immediately sped up in order to complete the work, after which he stopped his activity. Then he looked at the main character with an absolutely unperturbed gaze and demonstrated what he was doing. It turned out that the child had drawn his real self next to a large monster that looked very creepy. The main character was very scared when she saw this drawing. At the same time, Percy was calm and looked normal. Then the little child said in a very ominous tone that it was that same Mary. Medusa praised Percy for a beautifully drawn picture, but in her thoughts she screamed in fear and thought that she urgently needed to find a friend for the child. The main character had not been able to find a friend for Percy the previous day, and so she set out again to search for at least some information. This is exactly why the girl came to the market and, turning to one of the traders, told him what she was looking for. The man with horns thought for a moment and said that it was a difficult question. He was surprised that the girl knew that almost all the monsters living on the island were immortal but still spoke about some peer of the child. Medusa herself understood that this was a rather difficult request, so she was not very upset when she did not receive the necessary information from the man. He continued to say that although his job was to possess and transmit information, this was a completely different case. Finally, the man asked the girl if she could ask Steno if she would like to play baseball with him, since a pitcher had recently left their team, and the girl was ideal for this role. Soon the main character was already returning home carrying large bags of fresh baked goods from the market. The girl thought that she would have to give up the idea of finding a peer for Percy, and instead it would be better for her to become both a guardian and a friend for the child. She would really like the baby to have the opportunity to make friends in addition to his family, but she certainly shouldn't have allowed Percy to get close to this Mary. Suddenly the main character stopped and looked to the side, because it was there that something caught her attention and surprised her. Medusa saw her little child on the seashore in the company of some stranger. It turned out that Hesperides' sister was sitting on the shore with the baby. It seemed that they were having a pretty good time together. Medusa was very surprised to see this girl here and loudly turned to her and asked what was going on here. The main character immediately ran to the uninvited guest who greeted her with a smile on his face. Percy was also glad that Medusa had returned. Then the girl rudely asked what Hesperides was doing there and why she had come to her house without an invitation. The frightened girl justified herself by saying that she did not know that she needed to ask permission. She then went on to say that she came here to play with Percy because he showed her that the child was bored when he played alone. Percy confirmed this by saying that he enjoyed spending time with Hesperid, and now they were playing cooks. Medusa was very surprised by this. The main character approached the child to see how he played the cook here because he had not known about such a game before. Percy mixed the pebbles and leaves, imagining that they were ingredients for a dish. Along the way, Medusa noticed that the child's vocabulary had increased even more. Still, the girl thought that the child looked cheerful when he played with Hesperis, so she was no longer against it. Then the main character thought that in any case it was much better than if Percy played with that same Mary. After this, Medusa asked if Hesperida had come without her eccentric sister. The girl confirmed this and said that today she had dealt with problems that had arisen in the garden. The main character probably didn't hear this answer because she was completely immersed in her thoughts about Percy. The girl saw that the child was now very engrossed in the game and therefore assumed that when she played with him, he felt it differently. Medusa was a little upset when she realized that the baby thought of her only as a guardian and not as a friend. Then the main character began to wonder if she really imagined that she could become a friend who would feel like more than just family. Suddenly, a joyful Percy turned to Medusa and handed her his freshly prepared dish. The girl looked at this and continued to think that this child could make friends with anyone, and the fact that he needed a peer was only her conjecture and prejudice. The main character was so carried away by her thoughts that she began to eat the dish offered to Percy. Hesperides immediately began to loudly say that the girl should not have taken this game seriously. Some time passed. The blue sea was still calm and only made the noise of the water hitting the shore. There were 2 packages of unopened coffee lying on the table, indicating that someone was enjoying the taste of this drink right now. Out of the blue, the main character thanked Hesperida. She was surprised by this because she did not understand why she deserved praise from the girl. Medusa saw her guest's surprised look and explained that she thanked her for coming here and playing with Percy. Hesperida replied with a smile that there was no need to thank her for that, since she herself really liked children. The girl continued to say that compared to her, Medusa really deserved praise because she looked after children who got lost and were left alone. To this, the main character replied that in fact she did not know how to properly look after children, so she did not refuse any help. Hesperida then said that among the children the girl looked after, Percy was the smartest and most resourceful, so she could be friends with him without worrying about his age. Medusa, hearing these words, immediately remembered how she had recently watched Percy and Hesperides playing on the shore. It seemed that the main character treated this with a degree of doubt because she still believed that a peer would suit Percy much better as a friend. Nevertheless, the girl exhaled heavily and thought that her friendship with Hesperida was not bad. It was hard for her to talk about all this because her head was too heavy. Hesperida was very frightened, assuming that the snakes on Medusa's head had turned to stone. Then the girl explained with displeasure that she meant that she had too many thoughts in her head. Hesperides encouraged Medusa by saying that she was successful in raising a child. The main character asked the girl what she would do for Percy so that he would feel good. Hesperida was surprised and puzzled by this question because she did not know whether she had the right to advise on this matter. Still, the girl suggested that it would be great if the main character became a friend for the child and not just family. Medusa again answered with satisfaction that she had thought about it herself, but she just didn't know how she could do it. After thinking for a while, Hesperida advised the girl to try doing what her little child liked. At that very moment, the girl had an idea. She suggested that the main character do something together with Percy. Medusa was surprised by this proposal, but it was clear that it clearly interested her greatly, so she began to listen attentively to the girl. Hesperides said that Percy was quite smart for his age, but he still had many interests. That is why instead of just letting the child read books, it was necessary to let him try to do something on his own. The girl suggested that the main character go shopping with her child or gain some experience. Hesperides suggested that it would be as fun for the child as playing with friends. Medusa thought that the girl was right. She should do something with Percy, but not for educational purposes, but just for fun. Very soon, the main character decided to try out this new way of interacting with the child. Percy had no idea what was waiting for him ahead. Medusa suddenly entered the room and addressed the child. She had some idea for which she had brought many things with her. Percy was very surprised by this because he did not understand what was on the main character's mind and what she intended to do. The heavy things completely covered the girl's face, making it completely invisible. Suddenly, Medusa suggested that Percy try to cook food together for real. At this moment, the girl looked quite creepy. It seemed that the child was shocked not so much by the main character's proposal, but by her facial expression. At that very moment, Urieli appeared in the room. The girl immediately asked with displeasure what was happening here again and how much money her sister paid for all these purchases. Our heroes decided to do some cooking, so Steno demonstrated recipes for cookies in the shape of a bear. Medusa was delighted and thought it was very cute. The girl also suggested making cookies with a beautiful pattern. The main character immediately realized that it had two flavors at once, and Urieli suggested that it looked like the logo of one car. In addition, Steno suggested another version of the cookie, but everyone agreed that it looked a little creepy. In the end, Steno decided that all the recipes that were described in the book could be used, but she asked her sister to be careful and not to ruin the kitchen. Medusa was very pleased with the opportunity and suggested that Percy choose what he liked and get to work. The little child was also delighted with the abundance of possibilities, so he carefully chose the recipe, which took him some time. The main character humbly waited for the child to make a choice. She was very glad that she was able to involve Percy in this process. Finally, the child chose the cookie he wanted to make and pointed out the right recipe to Medusa. The girl thought that this was a great option that was well suited for the first time. Percy liked the shape of this cookie because it reminded him of the moon. All the ingredients for making cookies, the main one of which was Nemean lion flour, were already prepared. The main character looked at the child with a smile on her face, unable to wait for their work together to begin. Percy was also very pleased with this pastime and was ready to begin. All the ingredients were lying on the table and our heroes, dressed in aprons, finally decided to get to work. The main character began to study the cookie recipe starting from the very first point. The next moment, the girl was amazed by the amount of information and the precision of the processes, which is why she perceived all this as if it were higher mathematics. However, Medusa decided not to get hung up on the recipe and instead suggested that Percy do everything by eye. The child fully supported her in this. To begin with, the girl poured the required amount of snow-white flour into a deep bowl, of course, without doing any calculations. After this, it was necessary to add the eggs. Medusa decided to entrust this process to the child. She explained that he needed to carefully grasp the egg and lightly tap it to break it. However, everything turned out to be not so simple. As soon as Percy took the egg in his hands, it immediately cracked because the child was very strong and could not yet control it completely. The main character immediately began to encourage the baby, saying that there was nothing wrong with it, after which she suggested taking a new egg. Soon all the ingredients were in the bowl. The last step was to prepare the cookie dough. Medusa proudly said that all they had to do was mix everything thoroughly and suggested that the child do it. Percy, of course, did not refuse this work and began to do it diligently. The main character couldn't help but capture this moment and so quickly brought a camera. The camera screen took a long time to load, so it was unknown what was happening in the kitchen at that moment. All that could be heard were the sounds of hard work that seemed too hard. As a result, it turned out that the first dough was completely spoiled, so it could no longer be used. Medusa asked to mix the second dough slowly and thoroughly. This time the child did a great job. He took his time and controlled his excessive force, so the dough turned out the way it should have. Very soon our heroes gave the future cookies the desired shape, and now they looked exactly like the picture in the recipe book. Medusa was very happy that everything was finally over and that soon they would be able to enjoy their own homemade cookies. Percy was amazed at the result of their work. Now our heroes only had to wait a little while for their cookies to cook in the oven. After a few minutes, the room was filled with the pleasant smell of oil that came from the baking. There was still very little left, and it was time to serve the cookies to the table. Meanwhile, evening had already arrived. The sun had almost completely set behind the horizon, giving the opportunity for darkness to engulf everything around. Just at this time, Steno returned home and immediately looked into our hero's kitchen. She was very surprised by what she saw, because before that, she thought that Medusa and Percy were just making cookies. It turned out that our heroes were right now wielding tools, as if they were trying to make something. Steno did not understand at all what was happening here, and was just waiting for her sister to explain everything to her. Suddenly, The main character looked at Steno with tears in her eyes and asked her for help. The girl immediately asked what had happened to them. It turned out that the problem was that the cookies that Medusa and Percy had prepared were hard as a rock. Steno looked at one cookie, not believing that it was that bad. Then the girl took a risk and tried to bite off a small piece of the cookie. The next moment, Steno realized that her sister had not really exaggerated when she said that it was hard as a rock. However, the girl was not going to give up and continued to bite the cookie with all her might. Medusa was worried about her sister and asked her to stop before she broke all her teeth. However, Steno stopped, considering that all this was strange. The main character assured that they did everything strictly according to the recipe. Then Steno suggested making new cookies together, because Medusa had already made them many times, and Percy was very happy to hear this and considered the girl their savior. Steno continued to say that our heroes were having such a fun time and she didn't want to disturb them, but now she had to take care of her family and feed them normal food. Soon the girl began to prepare new cookie dough. She managed to do it much faster than Medusa and Percy. After this, Steno said that the obligatory stage was to pass this test. The girl immediately demonstrated this process. Medusa and Percy watched the proceedings closely and were amazed by Steno's professional skills. The final step in making the cookies was to bake them in the oven until done. Soon everything was ready. Medusa and Percy tried it and were amazed by the amazing taste, although they did not understand why it did not work for them as well, because they did all the same things. The main character immediately asked her sister how she did it. Steno was slightly embarrassed and therefore could not give a clear explanation. Then Medusa suggested that she cook with them. The girl agreed. Medusa and Percy were very happy about this because they believed that now they would definitely be able to make the best cookies. Suddenly, Urieli appeared in the kitchen. She was very surprised to see that Steno was also there. Then she asked what kind of cookies were lying to the side. The girl decided to try it, not understanding why Medusa intended to throw it away because it looked quite good. The next moment, Urieli understood everything when she couldn't bite the cookie. The main character told her sister that she could do whatever she wanted with it. The girl was happy about this because she remembered that recently there had been too much dirt in the yard, so she intended to use it as floor tiles. Our heroes wanted to make the best cookies in the world, but in the end, everything they made was just awful. The cookies remained hard as a rock, and the reason for this was unknown. However, thanks to the spoiled cookies that Medusa and Percy cooked, the path in the yard began to look well-groomed. This made Urieli's life much better. The girl was very pleased with the appearance and practicality of these cookies. Other cookies were used as building material, resulting in beautiful tiles with a nice pattern and natural wear, which was probably a good thing. Of course, Medusa and Percy didn't agree with this. They were upset about their failure and asked the author of this manhwa not to try to pretend that everything ended well. One early morning, Urieli was very worried and screamed that something bad had happened, and she didn't know what to do. Medusa was also scared by the surprise. The girl showed some piece of paper with text and explained that her horoscope had never had such a terrible prediction, and she, as a fortune teller, could not ignore it. The main character was surprised that this was the reason for her sister's panic and did not know how she should react to it. Still, the girl began to calm Urieli and say that the unfaithful one had a way to avoid the prediction. This situation attracted Percy's attention. The little child began to carefully study the city as if he understood everything about it. Suddenly, he began to deny the correctness of what was written there. Medusa and Urieli immediately began to listen to the child's explanations. Percy asked his aunt to look closely at the text and insisted that the information here was written incorrectly. Urieli found it hard to believe, but she decided to trust Percy and read everything carefully again. The kid continued to say that the sheet was a little dirty, and therefore the girl did not notice that it was yesterday's horoscope. Urieli was amazed when she realized everything. After this, the girl began to sincerely rejoice that she had avoided misfortune, and the surprised Medusa asked the child how he had understood everything. Percy replied that he had simply read it. The main character did not understand why the child was reading these horoscopes because they were not interesting at all. Then the child answered with annoyance that he had nothing to read. Medusa assumed that the child had already read everything they had at home, so it was necessary to get a new book for him. It was a bright sunny day. It was perfect for walking together. Medusa and Percy went to the market, taking Urieli with them, who was clearly unhappy with this. As expected, the Gorgon sisters attracted a lot of attention from those around them. The main character did not pay any attention to this and happily offered the little child to find him some new book. Percy was very pleased with this. Urieli, who was hiding from the sun under an umbrella, asked why her sister had dragged her along. The main character replied that the girl knew better than anyone the places where books were sold and therefore could help them. Soon, our heroes approached an inconspicuous store. On the way, Urieli told us that she was afraid of people and therefore did not go out anywhere during the day. Entering inside, Percy was very shocked to see around him many shelves that were bursting with books. Medusa said that it was called a bookstore. The little child remained just as delighted and really wanted to look at all the books that were sold here. A joyful Percy quickly ran forward while Medusa asked him to be more careful and carefully choose a book for himself. The main character was very happy to see the child happy and thought that they should have come here a long time ago. Urieli agreed with her sister and overall looked as if she was glowing with happiness because it was better here than on the street. Medusa was surprised by this. After this, Urieli went to look for a book for herself. At this moment, Percy approached the main character. The little child asked the girl to follow him because he wanted to show her the book he had chosen. Medusa was surprised that the baby found something for himself so quickly and followed him. Suddenly, the main character stopped because she saw something ahead that greatly surprised her. At the same time, Percy remained just as joyful and did not even think about the fact that something could go wrong. It turned out that Medusa was surprised that a small child was leading her to the department where horror books were sold. The main character could not understand the reason for this for a long time, so she just stood in place for some time. Still, she clarified whether the book that Percy wanted to get was in the horror section. The child confirmed this without any doubt. This shocked the main character, but she could not refuse the baby, so she prepared to see what he wanted to buy. Soon Urieli, who was choosing a book nearby, heard her sister's surprised exclamations, which immediately attracted her attention. The girl found Medusa among the shelves and asked what happened to her here. The main character closed her eyes and refused to accept the choices of a small child. Medusa pointed at the books and asked which one the little Urieli wanted to buy, who was watching this and still didn't understand what was going on here. Soon the girl explained to her sister that Percy asked her to choose a book for him, but she couldn't look at them because they were scary and were even worse than Urieli's. To this, the girl asked in an ominous voice that her sister give her one of these books into her hand. Urieli intended to simply choose any book and give it to her sister Medusa, but this did not suit her, and so she asked the girl not to choose at random. The main character also said that she knew nothing about horror, but wanted to give Percy a book with this genre, so she asked for help. Urieli began to examine the books. Taking one of the books from the shelf, the girl began to wonder how scary children's horror books were. Urieli glanced at the cover of this book and instantly fell silent. Censorship here was very appropriate. Urieli and Medusa were horrified by what they saw and did not believe that such a thing could be in a children's book. But Percy, on the contrary, was very impressed. The frightened girl immediately threw the book aside, not believing that it really was a children's book. Medusa absolutely agreed with her sister. Then the main character turned to the child and asked if he was not scared at all, to which she received a negative answer. Urieli suggested that it was because the child was human. The next moment, the little child with a smile on his face declared that such books reminded him of Mary, and that was why he liked them. This made the main character even more scared because she hoped that the child had already forgotten about her creepy friend. After this, Urieli encouraged that nothing could be done, and they would have to choose a book for the child in this genre. Medusa clearly didn't agree with this, but her sister reminded them of how stubborn Percy was and warned that if they hesitated, they would spend eternity in this store. The main character was even afraid to touch these books, so Urieli supported her as best she could. Still, the girl threw the first book she came across off the shelf, which was supposed to be a gift for Percy. Everyone was very glad that Medusa had postponed doing this. Please Percy thanks the main character for this gift. Meanwhile, Urieli was scattering sea salt around to drive away evil spirits. The little child, still with the same carefree smile on his face, promised that he would read this book very carefully. Medusa was of course not delighted by this, but she did not say anything to the baby. However, the frightened Urieli began to drive away the evil spirits with even greater zeal. Suddenly, someone approached our heroes and spoke in an uncertain voice. The unusual intern who worked in this store apologized and explained that other books fell and were damaged, so the girls would have to pay compensation. Urieli and Medusa were very surprised to see such a worker in a bookstore, and so for some time they just looked at him silently. However, the main character did not object and agreed to compensate for all the damage caused by them. After this, the intern, very worried, began to pack all the books that the girls had chosen while asking for forgiveness for disturbing them. Soon all the books were collected and neatly packed in a paper bag. After this, our heroes began to return home, taking with them several bags of books. Percy was very happy that he now had a lot of books. Of course, the main character was very sorry that all her money was spent on this, but she was glad that the child was happy. The girl was interrupted from these thoughts by Percy's voice, which addressed her. The happy child said that now he had many books to read with Medusa while they sat in the cafe. This also made the main character noticeably more cheerful, and she agreed with the child. After that, the girl said that they would not read these books together because she was scared. Percy was a little upset because they reminded him of Mary. Soon our heroes, as planned, came to the cafe. Scylla, as always, prepared her favorite drink for the main character. Medusa thanked the girl and then asked if they could sit in the establishment a little longer and read a book. Scylla replied that they could do whatever they wanted because she didn't care. The unexpected girl turned her attention to something and asked her friend what it was. It turned out that the small child was protected by warning tape and protective amulets. Scylla asked why this was necessary, but Medusa herself did not know this. After this, the owner of the establishment noticed that Percy had grown very quickly. The main character was surprised by this observation because she herself had not noticed it. Then she suggested to the girls that the child would soon go to school. Meanwhile, the little one was enthusiastically reading a book without being distracted by anything. The main character approached him and said that reading was of course good, but he should also rest, after which she suggested that he order a drink. Percy briefly replied that he didn't want a drink. Medusa didn't expect to receive such an answer, and therefore asked if he didn't like the drink. The next moment, the child coldly said that he didn't want to drink that drink because it wasn't coffee and the girls were deceiving him. Scylla said with annoyance that the baby had guessed everything, and Medusa was so surprised that she didn't even know how to react to this. Then the main character tried to explain to the child that nothing could be done about it because coffee was harmful for children. To this, Percy briefly replied that everything was clear to him. It was clear that despite this, the child was still unhappy. Scylla and Medusa were shocked and refused to believe that this little child reasoned like an adult. She suddenly remembered that she had received a new batch of coffee beans that could be used to make drinks for children, so she suggested that Percy try them. The main character was very happy about this and turned to the child and asked if he had heard that coffee had appeared here that he could drink. Surprisingly, Percy did not react at all to this good news for him and continued to read his book emotionlessly. The main character and her friend were surprised again because they did not understand what was happening to this little child. The next moment, the girls were blinded by the radiant smile of the little boy who was willing to try the new coffee. The main character was happy to tears, thinking at the same time that a child always remained a child. At this time, Scylla went to make coffee for her young visitor. Soon the drink the child had so desired was ready and stood right in front of him on the table. Percy was very happy that now he could try real coffee. Medusa couldn't help but capture this moment, and so she took out her camera. The child began to drink his coffee. Along the way, Medusa asked whether it was really possible to give this to children. Scylla assured that this was a new development for which she would receive a huge bonus. The next moment, the girl saw that Percy spat out the coffee offered to him, which indicated that he really didn't like it. The frightened main character immediately began to get angry at her friend because she literally just said that everything would be fine. Scylla and she herself did not understand what was going on. The girl demanded that her friend explain what was going on and threatened to turn her into stone. Suddenly, Percy started saying that he really didn't like the drink, and it was even worse than barley tea. Medusa was very surprised when she realized that the child simply did not like the coffee. After that, she was very scared when she saw the sinister look of her friend, whom she had threatened without understanding the situation. Scylla was very unhappy because she had been making coffee for 380 years and continued to study. But even despite this, the child did not like her drink. The next moment, Scylla, being a water nymph, solemnly swore on her name that she would prepare the best coffee drink for Percy. The main character was shocked by her friend's statement, but she thought that swearing by her name was too much. Immediately after this, Scylla began to fulfill her oath, which looked very spectacular from the outside. Every movement of the girl was clear and confident. She definitely knew what she was doing. The work was in full swing, and Medusa, who was watching this, wondered whether she should have told her friend that she didn't have to go that far. Soon the work was completed. Scylla presented several drinks at once and informed her guests that their kef was ready. The girl continued to say that all this was at her expense, which made Medusa very happy. Scylla also asked the child to try everything and say how they tasted. The girl prepared all these drinks so that Percy could drink them. The main character asked the baby to drink slowly through a straw so as not to get burned. The tasting of the first drink began. From the very first sip, it became clear that the child did not like this coffee. He didn't even have to say anything. Medusa tried to cheer up her friend and assured her that her coffee was the best in the world, and she could even import it to Olympus. Scylla did not react to this and continued to calmly watch. Meanwhile, Percy tried another of the offered drinks, after which he regretfully said that it was also tasteless. Medusa began to worry whether this had offended her friend. These worries were in vain because Scylla was a professional, and instead of being offended, she carefully thought over the reason why Percy didn't like anything. Soon, the little child began tasting the next drink. He was not afraid that now he could again experience an unpleasant taste. Suddenly, Percy seemed to sense something that showed in the expression on his face. Scylla immediately noticed this and thought that the child did not like the drink again. But to her surprise, Percy said that what was on the surface of the coffee was very tasty. The girl immediately understood what was going on and decided to make a new drink for the child. Medusa and Percy watched the girl's work in surprise, not understanding what she had figured out. It was not long before Scylla served her young guest another drink. The girl was sure that Percy would definitely like this coffee. The main character was surprised to see this drink because it was a regular latte. She did not understand how it was supposed to impress the child. Still, Percy dared to take a few sips, although he probably didn't believe that he would like this coffee. However, as soon as the little child tasted this drink, he was amazed and loudly declared that it was very tasty. The main character couldn't believe what she heard and began to ask how Scylla managed to satisfy Percy's taste buds. Pleased with herself, Scylla said that it was just coffee with milk. This answer surprised Medusa very much. Then the girl explained that Percy liked the cream that floated on top of one of the drinks, which meant that he should have liked the sweet coffee with milk because it was not bitter. Hearing this, the main character immediately began to call her friend the best barista in the world. Scylla liked this praise. After that, the girl said that she could share the recipe for this drink with Medusa so that she could prepare it for Percy at home. The main character was very happy about this. For some time, Medusa admired her friend, who was able to create a wonderful coffee with milk that even children could drink. The girl also didn't forget to praise the establishment, saying that it was the best coffee shop on their island of Scylla. It was nice to hear all this. It was getting close to evening, so our heroes said goodbye and headed home. Scylla looked at her visitors, with whom she had had a good time. However, soon the girl thought that it was a failure. At the same time, she was holding something in her hand, hiding it behind her back. It turned out that it was a package from regular 3-in-1 instant coffee, which she had prepared for Percy. Sometimes deception could be for the good, but now the frustrated girl thought only that it was a total failure.